Soldiers rush into the streets, urgently announcing that an undead creature is invading the city. They instruct everyone to seek refuge in their homes. Fear grips the townsfolk, and one by one, they scurry indoors, trembling at the thought of the impending horror. According to an ancient legend, the arrival of the undead heralds disaster and death, leaving a trail of destruction in its wake. Many have perished in futile attempts to combat this malevolent force. Yet this particular undead harbors no desire for cruelty or chaos. Instead, he dreams of becoming a paladin, yearning to wield the sacred light. More than just an undead from the underworld with lofty aspirations, he longs to ride the wildest horse and don armor with pride, just like those who uphold their oaths in fear. Neither life nor death. The undead warrior is determined to fight for the honor of those he serves, bound by loyalty until death do them part. Yet his feline companion interjects, reminding him that as a warlock, he cannot become a paladin. Reluctant to be swept into this madness, the cat expresses his reservations. Undeterred, the undead responds with a smirk, declaring that he will either assist his friend in achieving his goals, or risk turning him into an undead as well. The cat understands he has no choice but to lend a paw. "I will guide you on the path of a true paladin," he declares. An evil undead, seeking light and justice, has vowed to become the most sacred paladin of all. But to fulfill this promise, he needs a spokesperson for his faith. Our tale unfolds in the year 1266 of the 4th era of the Elven calendar, at the southern tip of the Celtic continent, in the kingdom of Isaac. In the midst of an unjust war, Princess Irene Barbara Becker commands her army against the humans, yet the odds are stacked against her. The human king, with a steely resolve, declares that in the name of the kingdom of Isaac, he will grant Irene mercy if she renounces her claim to the throne of the Becker house. The princess believes that the darkness of broken oaths, the corruption of faith, and the greed of the heart have merged into an eternal shadow that looms over the world. She boldly tells the king that his promises hold no value for her. In response, the king calmly declares that he will not break his oath in front of tens of thousands of witnesses. With that, the princess devises a strategy and commands her army to lower their weapons. They hesitate, still believing they can fight and harboring distrust toward the humans. However, Irene steps forward, asserting that the outcome of the battle has already been determined. There's no need for unnecessary sacrifices. They are here to honor their commitment. From this moment forward, she frees them from their obligations to her family and commands everyone to lower their weapons. With their leader's surrender, the others have no choice but to follow suit. The princess expresses her gratitude for the entertainment they've provided, but declares that the next battle will be hers alone. Despite the surrounding darkness, she insists that some still choose to defend their honor. Irene declares that this is her homeland, and retreat is not an option, no matter the cost. She is determined to defend her family's honor, vowing to fight until her last breath. The king scoffs at her resolve, calling her a foolish girl, but ultimately concedes, saying if that's her choice, so be it. He then commands his soldiers to prepare for the attack. Just then, a voice rings out, shouting about humility. The king turns, demanding to know who dared to speak. The mysterious figure continues to shout words of integrity and compassion, invoking valor and justice, before finally uttering the word sacrifice. The princess's eyes widen in recognition. It is Gray. She realizes that there are still those willing to defy the law to uphold their vows of glory and conviction. Meanwhile, the enemies recognize the knight as the legendary Gray, known for his ability to fell foes with a single blow. Yet, they convince themselves that their greater numbers will secure their victory. Gray raises his sword high, declaring his unwavering loyalty to Irene Barbara and the Becker. He proclaims that anyone who stands against them will become his enemy. With fierce determination, he vows to fight for their honor until his last breath. He then commands his Silvermoon Knights to advance, asserting that this is the true essence of a paladin. Meanwhile, to the south of the Celtic continent, the once idyllic port of Hamlet finds its tranquility shattered by a supernatural monster, disrupting the peace that had long reigned in the area. The soldiers march through the city, their eyes scanning for any signs of the undead, while issuing warnings to the frightened citizens. Panic begins to grip the streets as people hurriedly retreat into their homes, the reputation of the undead striking terror into their hearts. Realizing the urgency of the situation, the soldiers decide to split into smaller groups, each heading off in a different direction to intensify their search for the lurking menace. Not far away, the undead protagonist wonders what is wrong with the people around him when a cat suddenly speaks up, questioning why he is wandering the streets, since he is, well, dead. Startled by the talking feline, something he had never encountered before, the protagonist snaps back, telling the cat to be quiet. He knows all too well that soldiers are nearby, and he has no desire to attract their attention. After all, those horrible people would surely bring him nothing but pain. The cat insists that it only shouted after the undead did, as if to justify its startled response. The protagonist counters, noting that anyone who encountered a talking cat would likely scream in surprise. Yet, something feels off. This cat doesn't behave like an ordinary feline. After a moment of contemplation, he realizes the truth. A ghost must have possessed this cat, and that revelation explains everything. The cat warns him not to be easily impressed, explaining that many animals in this world are haunted by ghosts. It adds that a walking skeleton is quite a rarity, and inquires if this is his first time on the surface. The skeleton, curious, asks how the cat knows that. The cat smirks, claiming it can spot a novice undead from a mile away. It then questions why the skeleton has ventured to the surface instead of remaining safely in the abyss, where he risks getting pulverized. The protagonist begins, "It's a long story." He insists that the ghost must understand the abyss is a treacherous realm where survival demands exceptional skills. Reflecting on his past, he admits he was fragile at birth and thought that masquerading as a sturdy skeleton for a powerful lich would be a clever way to learn magic. That plan worked for a time, until one day the sorcerer announced a grand gathering where an extraordinary magical artifact would be auctioned off. Unable to attend himself, he decided to transform the skeleton into a soldier and send him in his place. However, in the midst of his frantic preparations, the skeleton accidentally dropped the experimental device, igniting the Great Lich's fury. Fearful, the protagonist chose to flee, seizing the chance to snatch a few treasures along the way. The cat listened in astonishment as the tale unfolded. Then, glancing at the horizon, he noted that the sun was about to set. With a hurried tone, he instructed the skeleton to forget this encounter ever took place. As he turned to leave, the cat muttered to himself, calling himself foolish for his curiosity, and deciding that he wanted no part in the affairs of someone marked by a lich. However, the skeleton refuses to let the cat escape. The cat, trembling, declares that he doesn't want to meet the same fate as the skeleton. He warns that one way or another, the skeleton will be pulverized, urging him to keep his distance. The protagonist, aware of the Great Lich's intentions, questions why the humans are also intent on hunting him down. With that, the cat explains that it's not difficult to understand. Undead beings have a dreadful reputation among humans, synonymous with calamity and death. As a result, they will go to great lengths to eradicate any undead that appears. However, the protagonist interjects, pointing out that both the ghost and the cat are also undead. "So why aren't you being hunted?" he asks, curiosity lacing his voice. The ghost calmly asserts that he is not the same as others, for he possesses a being characterized by good manners and elegance. Not only is this being well regarded among humans, but they also fulfill his wishes, offering both food and affection. Thus, the ghost believes it's no exaggeration to claim he is the master of the human race. Confused, the skeleton interjects, questioning what it truly means to be a perfect creature, and why a mere change in expression would automatically make a human his servant. He questions why rolling on the ground seems to grant him mastery over humans. The cat, unfazed, strolls away, remarking that it's unwise to converse with strangers. However, the skeleton isn't ready to let him go. He insists they must hide as someone is approaching from the city. In the distance, the princess rides closer on horseback. One of the soldiers announces that they have arrived at the port of Hamlet. Irene glances around, noting the eerie stillness of the city, where every house stands tightly shut. A group of soldiers approaches to greet the princess, introducing themselves as the port guards. They explain that they are on the lookout for an infiltrated undead and apologize in advance for any disturbances this may cause. Startled, the princess takes a moment to process their words, but one of her men quickly interjects, reminding her that they have urgent matters to attend to and cannot afford to waste time. Irene expresses her admiration for the soldiers' bravery, but insists it's time for her to lead her troops onward. With that, she and her soldiers advance, leaving the guards stationed at the border. One of the guards, curious, inquires about the identity of the foreigners. Their leader sharply advises him to mind his own business, adding that the port of Hamlet is on the brink of transformation. But for now, their priority is to locate the undead. Observing the scene, the skeleton inquires why everyone shows such reverence to those clad in metal. The cat explains that they are knights, the embodiment of justice and light, the guardians of the city and its inhabitants. Thus, whenever a knight appears, respect comes naturally. The skeleton nods in understanding, but the cat adds that he should return to the underworld and keep his distance from the Lich, reminding him that the surface world is no place for the undead. The protagonist firmly declares that he will never return to the underworld, a place where he feels utterly disrespected. "My name is Gray," he proclaims, vowing that one day he will earn the title of a respectable knight. However, the cat interjects, pointing out the harsh truth. Gray is merely a skeleton apprentice to a lich, too fearful of humans to ever become a knight. "I want no part in this madness," the cat insists, clearly unimpressed by Gray's lofty ambitions. As the protagonist steps away from the port, he reluctantly carries the cat with him. Along the way, Gray stops at a blacksmith's shop, picking up some equipment. He confidently declares that with this gear, he can become a knight. The cat, unimpressed, retorts that even if he were to steal a full suit of armor, it wouldn't make him a true knight. With that, the skeleton reveals that he had already planned ahead and stolen something else, a book titled The Knight's Guide to Success from the bookstore next to the blacksmith. He believes that by following its teachings, he can easily become a knight. The cat, intrigued, even attempts to snatch the book away from him, but the protagonist interjects, declaring it an important treasure. The cat then requests to be put down, expressing his disbelief at the skeleton's overflowing confidence. He points out that merely trusting in that book won't make him a knight. The protagonist, curious, asks if the 8 virtues outlined in the book aren't true. This question irritates the cat, who recognizes the skeleton's naivety. He retorts that, first and foremost, one would need a horse to truly become a knight. There was no horse in the world that a skeleton could ride. Yet, the protagonist stubbornly clings to this idea of a steed and begins to cast a spell. He reaches deep into the abyss, determined to summon a mount that suits his needs. The cat, terrified by this bizarre endeavor, can't help but call him a lunatic. Moments later, from the shadows, a mount crafted entirely of bones rises to the surface. The creature demands to know who has dared to awaken the great Tonitos. Gray quickly urges it to lower its voice, warning that too much noise could draw unwanted attention. He reminds Tonitos that he is now undead, and if anyone spots him, it could spell disaster. Confused, Tonitos questions how he ended up in this state, but Gray cuts him off, insisting he be quiet. The army is close by, and they could easily be discovered. Meanwhile, at Count Casper's castle, the Lord of Hamletport, Princess Irene arrives to visit him. Casper greets her warmly, calling her his adorable niece, and remarks that it has been a few years since their last meeting. Irene nods in agreement, expressing her gratitude for the Count's willingness to receive her. The Count, in turn, thanks her for her kindness, adding that his foolish son is incredibly fortunate to have her as his bride. Irene appears puzzled, clearly unsure of what the Count is referring to. The Count chuckles, suggesting that perhaps he simply forgot to mention it due to his advancing age. He then reveals that the primary purpose of her visit to his castle is to formalize the marriage agreement between her and his son. Irene hesitates, stating that such a union may not be feasible. Instead, she expresses her desire to discuss the Count's assistance in securing her inheritance of the Becker family's title. Casper argues that even if the Grand Duke names her as the heir, it would still pose a problem since she has a brother. However, Irene counters that her father's illegitimate son is not truly her brother, making him no more deserving of the inheritance than she is. Soon after, the Count reveals that the king has declared the son as the heir, leaving Irene with little choice but to keep her mother's property and renounce the Becker name to marry his son. This is a treaty that the Count insists he forged with the king, binding Irene to its terms. Irene confronts him, declaring that he is finally revealing his true colors. Yet, she reminds him of his oath to remain loyal to her after the king's death. Casper coolly replies that his loyalty now lies with Grand Duke Becker. Moreover, he points out that she never inherited her father's title. The princess, growing weary of the conversation, declares that they can forge a new agreement based on ancient customs. Outside, the guards persist in their relentless search for the undead. Meanwhile, the protagonist lurks in the shadows, increasingly aware that remaining hidden is becoming more difficult by the moment. The cat, sensing the rising tension, exclaims in desperation that at this rate, he's bound to meet his end, pleading with the skeleton to release him. Gray turns to the cat, asking if it won't lend a paw in his quest to become a knight. The cat, unfazed, retorts that he never made such a promise, insisting he's just a helpless feline. Even if he wanted the help, he claims, he simply can't. Undeterred, Gray brushes off the cat's excuses and excitedly reveals that he even has a set of armor for his horse. He recalls the cat's assertion that an undead could never become a knight, but counters that there's nothing in the book he pilfered to support that claim. The cat dismisses him as an imbecile, insisting that a knight is a servant of the light, and that someone born of darkness could never become one. Gray, however, remains unfazed. I know the holy light, he replies confidently, so I must also be part of it. The cat tries every argument in the book to sway him, but it's clear that Gray's resolve is unshakable. Surprisingly, even Tonitos joins the fray, supporting the protagonist wholeheartedly. We'll shine in history together, he declares, his eyes gleaming with determination. One day I want to run toward the sun again. Frustrated by the endless arguing and feeling unheard, the cat contemplates finding another body to possess. The protagonist, with a hint of mischief, suggests transforming him into a skeleton, claiming that as an undead, he would never feel tired. Again, no fatigue, no worries. The cat's demeanor shifts instantly. That's definitely not what he desires. With this unexpected motivation, he declares that he will help the protagonist become a knight. Gray mentions that the offer to transform him into an undead still stands, but the cat firmly declines, insisting he's content just as he is. Meanwhile, the guards continue their search through the city for the undead. Fatigue begins to set in as night falls, and just when they think their efforts are in vain, a figure emerges from the shadows, drawing closer. The protagonist and his mount trudged along, both clad in armor. The cat urged him, "Don't look sideways, just keep moving forward." Suddenly, a guard approached them, announcing that the city was under curfew and advising him to find an inn for the night. Once the guard had passed, the cat smirked. "See? It worked. We slipped by unnoticed." Gray beamed with pride, declaring, "I'm a genius for hiding under this armor." Even Tonitos was shrouded in darkness, going unnoticed by all. The protagonist expressed his desire to find a master who could train him to become a knight. The cat, however, scoffed at the idea, insisting that no one would be available in the middle of the night. "Why not?" Gray asked, puzzled. With a hint of irritation, the cat replied, "Because normal people are asleep at night. If you want to find someone, do it during the day." Feeling a bit lost and overwhelmed, the protagonist sighed and asked, "So what am I supposed to do now? This is my first time as a knight, and I really don't know where to start." The cat proposes heading to a tavern, a favorite haunt for humans seeking a drink. Meanwhile, back with the princess, a guard informs her that she has a duel scheduled for tomorrow and urges her to get some rest. Irene, feeling uncertain, asks if they believe her decision was too impulsive. The soldier shakes his head, insisting that's not the real concern. He struggles to comprehend why she agreed to such challenging terms. The princess insists that Casper would only agree to their terms under specific conditions. However, the soldier counters, arguing that they shouldn't trust someone like him. He points out that the count has only a handful of men, claiming that their forces alone would be sufficient to defeat him. The princess replies that ever since the king attempted to illegally seize the Becker family's territory, their options have dwindled. That's precisely why they need the support of Casper's troops. The soldier explains that the count has arranged a turn-based battle between his knights and the princess's knights. The victor will be the side that lasts until the end, with around 20 knights on each side. He doubts they can win through sheer numbers. However, the princess counters his pessimism, asserting that they have a chance. By employing clever tactics and targeting the enemy's weak points, she believes they can turn the tide in their favor. Back to the protagonist, Gray arrives at the tavern. The cat nudges him, urging him to go inside and order a glass of wine and a fish. Curious, Gray asks, "Why the fish?" The cat replies, "I'm hungry and need to be fed if I'm going to keep helping you." With a resigned sigh, Gray agrees and steps into the tavern. A waitress greets him warmly, inquiring, "Are you dining alone?" The protagonist mentions he has a cat, and she playfully claims the same. Amused by his humor, she guides him to a nearby table. Meanwhile, a group of bandits in the tavern takes note of the newcomer and considers inviting him to join their game. However, their leader interjects, stating that not just anyone can join the Red Scorpions. They must first prove their worth. Sitting at his table, Gray beams with delight at being called a knight by the waitress. However, the cat chimes in, reminding him that it was merely a courtesy. Anyone in armor gets the same treatment. Then, with a hint of skepticism, the cat asks if the protagonist has any money. Gray furrows his brow, pondering the question. "Are you referring to those metal objects humans are always collecting?" He replies, "I did manage to snag a few from the LICH treasure room." The cat raises an eyebrow, curiosity piqued. "So, why did you only take one coin?" Gray isn't entirely sure about the situation. However, the cat assures him that it will suffice for today, though it hints at the challenges that lie ahead. The protagonist, trying to lift Gray's spirits, encourages him not to be so pessimistic, pointing out that they can earn money just like the humans at the next table. At that table, a group of bandits is engrossed in gambling and placing bets. They can't help but notice the protagonist has taken a seat among them and has been winning every hand since he arrived. Gray finds himself in a bewildering situation, unsure of his surroundings or his purpose. Fortunately, he has his feline companion by his side. The cat advises him to tone down his winning streak, suggesting he intentionally lose a few bets to avoid drawing too much attention. But Gray is reluctant. After all, he's on a winning roll, and his opponents are seething with frustration, accusing him of sheer luck. Just then, one of the challengers slams down a wager, raising the stakes to 10 coins. The cat warns the protagonist against taking the risk, insisting it could lead to serious trouble. However, despite all the advice, Gray decides to accept the bet. This infuriates the cat, who exclaims that they're bound to end up dead. After some time, Gray emerges from the tavern, a stack of money in hand. He smirks, assuring the cat that their worries were unfounded and that he's gained invaluable experience in the underworld. However, the cat warns that winning all the time isn't necessarily a good thing. Just then, bandits close in on the protagonist, accusing him of thinking he can simply walk away after taking all their money. They declare that a cheater like him deserves a lesson. The cat nods, emphasizing that this is precisely what he meant, but Gray remains oblivious to the gravity of the situation. The cat urges him not to remain still, reminding him that he's been on the run all day. Gray responds, "This time it's different. Tonitos is by my side and ready for action." The cat, skeptical, warns that he has a feeling the horse will fall apart after just a few steps. But Gray remains steadfast in his confidence. As the bandits notice the protagonist attempting to escape, they demand that he stay and fight. Unfazed, Gray simply replies, "Get out of the way." With that, he spurs his horse forward, crashing into those who refuse to budge. Harnessing Tonitos' strength, he seizes the moment to leave his enemies in the dust. Tonitos' strength is staggering, leaving his enemies sprawled on the ground in defeat. The entire gang lies defeated, unable to keep up with the relentless protagonist. Only Gray remains standing, and onlookers can't help but murmur about the gambler's poor judgment in challenging this mysterious knight. One of the surviving gang members hesitantly asks their leader if he still believes this knight is merely a vagabond. The cat watches in disbelief as Tonitos resolves the situation all on his own. Meanwhile, Gray reveals that he secretly infused the horse with a few layers of magic. The following day, anticipation fills the air as the duel approaches. News spreads quickly. Everyone is buzzing with excitement at the prospect of the Lord of the City competing. It's been ages since anything thrilling has happened in Hamlet. Even the leader of the former gang can't contain his enthusiasm, noting that someone had paid them handsomely to take part in the event. He assures the protagonist that, with his skills, winning this tournament will be a breeze. Gray inquires if this victory would earn him the title of knight. The leader explains that participation in the tournament is reserved for knights only. However, the lady intervenes, granting each of them a temporary title of knight for the duration of the event. Gray is not pleased. He longs for the true title of knight, complete with the prestigious seal. Meanwhile, at the banquet, the Count indulges in a lavish feast, eagerly anticipating the tournament's start. He turns to his niece, a hint of concern in his voice. "Do you understand what's at stake?" he asks. "If you lose this tournament, you'll forfeit any remaining honor you have." Irene asserts that the Becker family's reputation is none of the Count's concern. Casper, irritated, notes her refusal to call him uncle anymore. The princess declares that if she loses, she will honor her vow, but if she wins, she hopes the Count will uphold his promise. Casper assures her he will, though his expression betrays a different intention. Meanwhile, the tournament's organizer steps forward to announce the rules, revealing that each participating side will have their own knights. He also declares that if Count Casper loses, he must pledge his loyalty to Lady Irene. Conversely, if she is defeated, she must accept an engagement with the Count's son. Several knights step forward to represent the Count, but on the princess's side, only a handful of participants emerge. The crowd murmurs in disbelief, questioning how a mere dozen knights could possibly stand against 100. Many place their bets on the Count's inevitable victory. Casper reassures Irene, telling her not to worry and promising to take it easy on her. She turns to the soldier Horace and inquires about the mercenaries' arrival. He confirms that they are indeed waiting outside the arena. With that, the tournament kicks off and the clash between the knights begins. The participants unleash their full strength, giving it everything they've got. After all, the honor of their lords hangs in the balance until one unfortunate soul gets struck on the head and loses. With that, Irene claims victory in the first round. The second round begins, and once again, Irene emerges triumphant. However, as the rounds progress, Casper starts to turn the tide in his favor. Observing their struggles, Horus points out that they are outnumbered and requests the princess's permission to take charge of the situation. Irene reassures him that there's no need to rush and instructs him to bring in the mercenaries. As Horus begins to grasp her strategy, he realizes she plans to wear down the Count's troops with their help. The princess emphasizes that they must outmaneuver the Count's superior forces. With her own numbers limited, she knows that every deployment must be executed with precision. Soon after, the mercenaries arrive, eager to lend their skills, having barely left the first king. Horus emphasizes the importance of this mission for the Becker house, expressing his hope that they will help the princess secure victory. The mercenaries, however, remind him that while they are committed to doing their best, they cannot guarantee success, especially given the enemy's numerical advantage. Frustration wells up in Horus, as he realizes he must depend on a group of mercenaries. Among the mercenaries, one individual captures the protagonist's attention. He turns to Horus and asks if he can be made a knight. Horus replies that his lady has already granted him that title. However, Gray insists that he doesn't want a temporary designation. He yearns to be a true knight. Afterward, Horus remarks that the man before him is exceedingly greedy. Just then, the princess interjects, asserting that the title of knight is earned through merit and cannot be bestowed lightly. However, she adds a challenge. If he can defeat 50 enemy knights, she will grant him the title of an official knight. Gray stands in astonishment at her bold request. Even the cat seems to think that number is an exaggeration, muttering that the woman is asking for too much. He tries to persuade Gray not to accept, but his words fall on deaf ears. The cat is left speechless as Gray agrees without a moment's hesitation. The princess smiles and declares that they have an agreement, assuring him she will count on him when the action begins. Even her loyal squire is taken aback, but he dutifully follows her orders. Meanwhile, the cat curiously inquires what Gray was thinking to have accepted such a situation. The protagonist confidently claims that Tonitos can easily take down 50 opponents, leaving him feeling invincible. However, the cat interjects with a crucial observation for Gray. None of the other knights are fighting on horseback. This means that if Gray wants to bring Tonitos into the fray, he must first secure victory in a ground battle, as only the winner has the right to dictate the type of combat. He asks Gray if he knows anything about fencing. Gray shakes his head, admitting he doesn't. The cat suggests they need to change that. After a while, the princess returns to her post. As soon as she arrives, the count remarks that he never expected her to trust mercenaries like the Red Scorpions, concluding that the Becker family is truly in decline. The princess calmly replies that soon the count will learn the truth about who is truly in decline. Moments later, one of the mercenaries approaches his boss, informing him that the princess has requested his presence in the ring. With determination, their leader readies himself for battle, declaring that it's time to prove what he's truly made of. Witnessing this, the count sinks into despair. His men stand no chance against the mercenary leader, who effortlessly defeats them one by one, proving that the power of the mercenaries should never be underestimated. As he takes down several opponents, the audience erupts in praise for the mercenary leader's skill and prowess. Casper can't help but wonder about the identity of this mercenary who seems to win time and again. One of his servants informs him that this is none other than the leader of the Red Scorpions, known as Killer Paz. The fact that a mere mercenary has come this far is nothing short of remarkable. Soon, the dupe decides it's time to unveil his trump card, declaring that these mercenaries must learn the consequences of defying a count. In the audience, praise for Paz's performance fills the air, with many dismissing the others around him as mere amateurs. However, shock ripples through the crowd the following night when the Count sends out not an ordinary soldier, but a colossal monster. Even the princess is taken aback by the sight. The giant turns to his opponent and declares with a mischievous grin that he craves some excitement. Paz mentions that he needs to discuss additional fees with his lady before proceeding. Meanwhile, the protagonist struggles to learn how to wield a sword, finding it far more challenging than anticipated. In a moment of frustration, he even suggests using magic to make the sword move on its own. But the cat quickly dismisses the idea, warning that it's a terrible plan. As the impending fight draws near, a heavy silence blankets the city, with its residents holding their breath in anxious anticipation. A terrifying figure resembling a monster stands ready to face an opponent half his size. The announcer's voice booms through the arena, declaring that the duel between the Count and the princess is about to commence. With a flourish, he signals the start of the match. Almost immediately, the ogre lunges forward, but Paz skillfully dodges the incoming blow. He relies on his speed to both dodge and strike. However, his opponent catches him off guard. Just as Paz launches his attack, his sword shatters, leaving him bewildered. The ogre looms ominously behind him, and he realizes he must evade quickly. Yet, this time his speed fails him. The opponent unleashed a devastating blow, striking Paz squarely in front of the entire crowd, including the princess. The impact left him gravely injured, sending him hurtling away from the arena and crashing at the feet of the very crowd that had once cheered for him. Gasps of horror filled the air as onlookers rushed to his side, desperate to help. Meanwhile, the Count bursts into laughter, reveling in the consequences of anyone daring to oppose him. Paz struggles to rise from the ground, wincing as he admits that he might have broken a few ribs. Assessing the dire situation, he declares that he'll need to charge double the promised payment. In a surprising twist, he leaps away just before another attack can land. The mercenary leader refuses to back down, launching another assault on his opponent. This time, his strike lands true, injuring the enemy's eyes and leaving him blinded. Seizing the moment, he readies himself for another charge, sprinting toward the ogre and using every ounce of his speed to deliver a desperate blow with the remnants of his sword. The giant accuses his opponent of fighting dirty, but those are his final words as he soon falls defeated. Paz, the leader of the Red Scorpions, is not only celebrated for his strength, but also revered as the most beloved figure in the port of Hamlet. The crowd erupts in applause, honoring him for yet another display of his legendary prowess. As the fight concludes, the princess swiftly commands that Paz be replaced and taken to a doctor. Meanwhile, the cat discovers the protagonist and inquires about his activities. Gray explains that he's crafting a weapon since he can't wield a sword. He figured he'd create something more suited to his abilities. The cat warns him that if he doesn't hurry, the tournament will conclude, and he'll miss his chance to compete. Panic washes over Gray. The duel between Irene and Casper dragged on until midnight. So far, the princess found herself at a disadvantage, as the Count's larger army gave him the upper hand. Despite the mercenaries' superior skills, they were ultimately worn down by exhaustion. Yet, their unwavering courage pushed them to fight on. Still, Paz understood that sheer determination alone wouldn't secure their victory. After all, the opposing side boasts a greater number of warriors. As Paz observes the unfolding battle from the rooftop, the master of the knights approaches him, seething with anger. He confronts Paz about the leader of the mercenaries, furious that half of his men surrendered midway through the fight. Paz coolly responds, "They are mercenaries, not knights. They were paid to fight, not to sacrifice their lives." Upon hearing this, the master of the knights becomes visibly irritated. He demands to know where the man who agreed to fight 50 enemy soldiers is. Paz hesitates, unsure of how to respond, and finally suggests that Gray might have gone to feed his cat. The master of the knights scowls, insisting this is no time for jokes. Count Casper has just won another round, leaving only 5 people on the princess's side. If they don't act quickly, the outcome will not be in their favor. At this moment, the master believes he is the only one capable of fighting. Suddenly, he senses an approaching presence that startles him. Turning to see what it is, he discovers none other than Gray, ready to engage in battle. But what truly surprises him is what Gray brings along. As Gray strides forward, a massive gate slung over his shoulder, he casts an intimidating presence that sends a chill through the crowd. The protagonist, unfazed, calmly inquires about the whereabouts of his 50 opponents. Casper stands frozen, utterly speechless at the audacity of it all. The princess, too, is taken aback, her emotions swirling within her. Yet, amidst the chaos, a spark of hope ignites in her heart. She recognizes in Gray a chance to shift the game in her favor. The protagonist inquires about the battle's progress, but the master of the knights is too stunned to respond. All he can manage is to inform Gray that the Count still commands over 50 knights. With a determined glint in his eye, Gray declares that he has arrived just in time and strides purposefully toward the ring. After that, the protagonist drops his gate in the center of the ring, leaving his opponent visibly shaken. The soldier hadn't anticipated facing something so formidable. Gray ascends to the top of the gate, declaring that he's ready for the fight and eager to begin without delay. Caught off guard, the opponent drops his weapon to the ground and concedes, declaring his surrender to the protagonist. With a confident smirk, Gray asks, "Who's next?" However, instead of stepping forward, the remaining opponents begin to bicker among themselves, each trying to assert who should take the first turn in the ring. The tension shifts from confrontation to chaos as they squabble, revealing their reluctance to face Gray. Despite the tension in the air, no one is willing to step into the ring to fight. Instead, they choose to bicker among themselves. The Count watches this spectacle unfold, feeling a mix of nervousness and fear. He confronts the protagonist, demanding to know how he dares to tear the gate from his palace and wield it as a weapon. With a tone of indignation, he declares that he will not tolerate such audacity. However, since the protagonist technically emerged victorious in their first encounter, he calmly summons his horse, ready for whatever comes next. The Count commands that his knights be summoned, and his subordinate quickly relays the order. The knights spring into action, forming a disciplined formation. Their leader addresses them, emphasizing that their honor hinges on this battle. With determination in his voice, he urges them to defeat their opponents swiftly. Fearful, the cat turns to Gray, asking what is happening as soldiers draw near, leaving him speechless. The crowd around them is equally bewildered, especially as they find themselves standing before the imposing gates of the Count's palace. The Count, witnessing the unfolding chaos, is consumed by rage and demands to know what is going on. His subordinate mentions that some knights would rather relinquish their titles than engage in battle. However, he counters that they might have a chance if they switch the competition to a cavalry battle. Casper agrees, stating that if that's the only option, he's on board with the plan. Meanwhile, the protagonist remains calm, waiting for the opponents to draw near. As the Count approaches, he remarks on the protagonist's impressive strength. He remarks that he never expected to see someone like the protagonist compete in this tournament, but insists that everyone present would be eager to witness his physical prowess in battle. The protagonist quickly realizes this wasn't part of his plan. Even the princess catches on to the Count's intentions and recalls that, according to the tournament rules, the winner has the authority to dictate the format of the next match. Casper declares that if the princess refuses to accept the cavalry battle, his men will not fight, and the tournament will drag on indefinitely, something he knows she certainly doesn't desire. Turning to the protagonist, he inquires whether he is willing to accept the challenge for a cavalry battle. Gray responds with a single condition. If he agrees, the Count must send all his men to face him at once. The princess is taken aback by the unexpected proposal. Casper inquires if the protagonist is prepared to take on all remaining challengers in a single battle. Gray agrees, but points out that if his opponents keep quitting midway, he won't stand a chance against 50 fighters. The master of the knights dismisses the idea of Gray facing so many at once. However, the Count, brimming with confidence, readily accepts the challenge. The master shakes his head in disbelief, convinced that this is madness. Meanwhile, the princess speaks up, asserting that Gray is making his request with remarkable confidence. The protagonist is taken aback by her words, but he quickly regains his composure. With determination, he declares that he is confident in his victory and will do this for the princess. Irene urges him to summon all his courage and strength against his opponents, wishing that the Holy Spirit be with him. Grateful for her words, Gray climbs down from the gate and thanks the princess. Suddenly, a horse gallops into view, drawing the attention of the crowd. From the rooftop, Tonitos appears, accompanied by a cat, ready to join Gray in the battle. The Count's soldiers quickly regroup, their leader confidently declaring that they face only one mana-perfect opportunity to turn the tide with a single, decisive strike. With a unified battle cry, they launch their attack. Yet Gray evades their blows with remarkable skill, weaving through the onslaught. Once he has deftly escaped the enemy's blades, he draws his sword and counterattacks from the height of his horse, striking back with precision and power. The opponent is taken aback by the sudden attack, only to discover he hasn't been harmed. Confused, he wonders what just happened. Meanwhile, the cat chimes in, questioning Gray's choice to wield a sword when he clearly lacks the skill. Gray sheepishly apologizes, admitting he simply wanted to give it a try. The opponents perceive this as a provocation, igniting their leader's fury even further. Amidst the tension, the cat observes the escalating situation and inquires about their next move. Gray, recognizing the futility of swordplay, declares that he must revert to the Lich's signature tactics. Afterward, he channels his magic, summoning a series of protective spells for both himself and his mount. The enemy leader, noticing the protagonist's stillness, seizes the moment to launch an attack, but Gray merely fixes them with a piercing dark gaze. In an instant, the enemies find themselves under assault, caught off guard by the unexpected retaliation. The force bearing down on them is relentless, as Tinnitus leads his master straight into the fray, striking down enemies with each powerful stride. One soldier, attempting to rally his comrades, urges them not to panic, insisting that their opponent only possesses riding skills. He confidently declares that all they need to do is take down the horse to end the battle. However, as they launch their attack, Tinnitus's protective magic flares to life, shielding him from harm. The soldier who struck is left frozen in disbelief, realizing too late that they underestimated their foe. Not just him, but everyone else stood no chance. The protagonist was practically trampling over them all. The fallen soldiers could hardly believe their eyes, as the strength displayed by the protagonist was nothing short of monstrous. Even the Count, gripped by fear, muttered that the protagonist must be cheating in some way. The master of the princess's knights beams with pride at Gray's unexpected victory. Meanwhile, the princess spots a sword lying on the ground. She picks it up and approaches Gray, returning the weapon to its rightful owner with a graceful gesture. The protagonist expresses his gratitude for her gesture and asks if, now that he has triumphed over the 50 opponents in the tournament and fulfilled his promise, she could honor her word and make him a legitimate knight. The princess smiles and assures him that she will indeed keep her promise, granting him the esteemed title. At that moment, the crowd erupts into cheers, their excitement echoing through the arena. And so, before the gathered crowd, a great knight is born, one destined to change the world. Reactions are mixed. Some storm away in anger, while others erupt in cheers for the protagonist. Yet, the hero himself remains oblivious to the spectacle unfolding around him. Confused by the human customs, he can only wonder why he's being tossed into the air like a celebratory banner. Sometime after the tournament concludes, a crowd gathers at the city's castle, drawn by rumors that the knight who defeated 50 men is tossing away gold coins and precious stones. The cat, puzzled, wonders why the protagonist is acting this way. Gray explains that he is sharing the treasure he earned with the less fortunate. Just last night, he was officially recognized as a legitimate knight by the princess herself. She apologized for the simplicity of the ceremony, but then asked the protagonist to walk by her side from that moment on. Gray vowed to fight for her until his last breath. In addition to being named the Knight of the Silver Moon, he was also granted a room in the castle. The cat remarked, "This world is truly mad, an apprentice lich becoming a knight." The protagonist revels in his triumph, having finally achieved his dream of becoming a legitimate knight. However, the cat interjects, noting that a hint of wickedness still lingers within him. With a determined smile, Gray responds that now, as a knight, he has much to learn and plans to dive into his studies immediately. The cat, unimpressed, simply retorts that he shouldn't be disturbed. He's off to sleep. The protagonist confesses that he can't sleep, as he desperately needs help. He recalls reading in a book that knights often share their treasures with the less fortunate. However, Gray is puzzled, unsure of what treasure or poverty truly means. Sensing his confusion, the cat takes a moment to explain the concepts of wealth and poverty, shedding light on the world beyond Gray's understanding. He claims the castle is brimming with treasures, suggesting that if Gray wishes to search, he can ransack the place for riches. However, the cat is taken aback by the protagonist's actions, unable to believe that Gray would actually steal the castle's treasures and distribute them to others. In that moment, it dawns on the cat that Gray is truly a fool, wandering aimlessly without a clear purpose. Meanwhile, in Irene's temporary office, a few of her soldiers arrive, looking somewhat hesitant. Irene glances up and asks what brings them here so early. Abby Roberts, one of the soldiers, shifts uncomfortably, accompanied by Horace, the master of knights. With all due respect, Abby asks if the princess truly trusts Gray. Irene meets his gaze, reminding him that, like the others, he witnessed Gray's bravery firsthand. "I need his strength," she asserts, her conviction clear. Roberts expresses his concerns, stating that they know nothing about Gray, especially regarding his past. He points out that Gray didn't even remove his helmet during the swearing ceremony, which raises suspicions that he might be a spy for the king. However, the princess counters, asserting that if Gray were truly a spy, she wouldn't be sitting there discussing it with them. She emphasizes that suspicion breeds discord and reaffirms her trust in Abby Roberts as her most loyal servant. With a firm tone, she hopes this matter won't need to be revisited. Suddenly, a figure bursts into the room, announcing that the Knight of the Silver Moon has stolen Count Casper's treasure and is currently distributing the spoils from the castle tower. The princess, upon hearing this shocking news, crushes her quill pen in a fit of frustration. Her attendants exchange worried glances, sensing her unease, and they quickly ask if she is all right. The princess agrees, but insists on speaking with Gray right away. Irene has never seen herself as a competent lady. From a young age, she was trained to be a warrior, yet her clumsiness made her feel inferior to others. Even her fencing instructor would chastise her for falling too easily, insisting that she could never become the next Duchess of the Becker family if she remained so weak. Yet, Irene harbors a quality she has yet to recognize in herself, an exceptional ability to conceal her true feelings. From a young age, she has mastered the art of performance, skillfully navigating the expectations placed upon her. As Irene approaches the tower, her mind races with questions about Gray's intentions. She reflects on Casper's defeat in the duel, yet he still evades delivering the oath banner. Frustration wells within her. She wishes she could simply rid herself of both of them. Her guards, perceptive as ever, notice her simmering anger, despite her efforts to mask it. Casper is the first to confront the protagonist, declaring him an armored thief rather than a knight. Gray quickly defends himself, insisting that he is merely following the noble duty of every knight redistributing wealth to the poor. However, the Count interjects, asserting that this treasure does not belong to Gray, but to him, and he accuses the protagonist of being nothing more than a thief. Gray was blissfully unaware that the treasure he had stumbled upon already belonged to someone else. "How could I have known?" he protested. "There was no name on it." In the distance, the Count's furious shouts echoed, prompting Roberts to urge the princess to move quickly. After all, in addition to her remarkable acting skills, Irene possessed another quality essential for a lady: grace under pressure. She believed that the combination of Gray and Casper presents a remarkable opportunity, as she has an uncanny ability to recognize the perfect moments. Just as the Count is embroiled in an argument with Gray, the princess arrives and inquires if Casper had summoned her. She adds that the Count has been avoiding her, and she had begun to doubt whether he would keep his promise. Casper is taken aback by her presence. Unlike Gray, who offers a warm greeting, the Count remains consumed by his anger. Undeterred, the princess steps forward and declares that if Casper refuses to uphold his vows, she will have the authority to strip him of his title on the spot. Casper's eyes widen in disbelief at her bold assertion. As he gazes at Gray, he realizes that the princess must have instructed him to intentionally share his treasure with the people. Irene quickly steps in to defend herself, insisting that she is not involved in this scheme. She promises to compensate him for any damage her knight may have caused, asserting that, unlike others, she truly understands how to fulfill her responsibilities. Casper is left feeling humiliated by the situation. Nevertheless, he hands over the document of the Oath of Loyalty, cautioning that the princess won't be able to stand against the king simply because she has received a few troops from the Count. Irene, however, dismisses his concerns, asserting that she doesn't need his advice on the matter. Meanwhile, Gray, sensing the tension, asks if he has done something wrong, but the princess reassures him that he hasn't. Irene counters that Gray's actions actually helped her assert control over Casper, a feat made possible by the pressure he faced. Observing her rising anger, her soldiers caution that she is losing her composure. Taking a moment to collect herself, she acknowledges that, while it's wrong to steal from others, she will assist Gray in rectifying the situation. However, she warns him that if it happens again, it will come out of his salary. Having accomplished her goals, Irene announces that there's no reason to remain in Hamlet. She informs Gray and the others that they will depart the following day. Once the princess exits, Gray turns to the cat and asks, "What is a salary?" The cat, already aware of Gray's naivety, can't help but feel a mix of disbelief and concern. What truly astonishes him is that a lady would choose a lunatic as her knight. He can't shake the feeling that the future might be rather bleak. The next day breaks, signaling the time for the princess and her entourage to set off. Gray observes the multitude of knights gathered and wonders aloud why he hadn't seen them at the tournament. The cat explains that these are common soldiers, which is why they didn't participate. Among them, he adds, are some hired from Casper's group of 1,000. Soon, the cat senses an unsettling feeling, as if something ominous looms on the horizon. As night descends, they set up camp along the road. Amidst the flickering campfire, a soldier scours the area in search of the Knight of the Silver Moon. At last, he finds him. Gray, curious, inquires about the soldier's purpose. The soldier replies, uncertainty lacing his voice, that he has received orders from Lord Horace to escort Gray to Lady Irene's tent. Inside the tent, Horace's dissatisfaction is palpable as he voices his disagreement with the princess. Irene argues that Casper's oath presents a unique opportunity to rally more lords to their cause. She insists on the need for trustworthy messengers to spread the word, and there's no one she trusts more than Horace. When she asks why he won't accept this responsibility, Horace firmly declines, stating he cannot lead Gray alone in his absence, especially since she had sent him along with Roberts as messengers. Her loyal squire remains skeptical of Gray, and once again, the topic arises. The princess poses a question. If Gray were to harbor ulterior motives against her, would Horace be able to stop him? The Master of Knights pauses, taken aback by the gravity of the question. Then Irene suggests that instead of standing idly by, he should take on the role of a messenger to help advance her campaign. Soon after, Gray arrives at the tent, feeling the weight of the knight's intense gazes upon him. Confused, he wonders aloud if he has done something wrong to warrant such scrutiny. Horace steps forward, placing a firm hand on Gray's shoulder. "I'm counting on you to keep the princess safe," he says, his voice steady and serious. With that, Horace and Abby turn and leave the camp, leaving Gray with the heavy responsibility resting on his shoulders. Afterward, Gray finds himself utterly bewildered. He couldn't grasp a single word Horace had said. Seeking clarity, he contemplates asking Irene about what it truly means to keep her safe. He also wonders aloud why the cat had to fall asleep just then. Now, there's no one left to answer his questions. Noticing his unease, the princess raises an eyebrow and probes him, but Gray brushes it off, insisting it's nothing. He reassures her that he knows exactly what he needs to do. However, the princess soon realizes that the truth is quite the opposite, as she observes him lost in his thoughts. She suggests that Gray should simply stay close by to ward off any threats that might approach her. Irene finds Gray to be quite peculiar. Not only does he exhibit such odd behavior, but he also refused to remove his helmet during the swearing-in ceremony. She begins to suspect that Gray might be from another country, or perhaps not even human at all. Under different circumstances, she muses, she wouldn't have accepted him as a knight. The protagonist insists he was born in this country, attempting to deflect her suspicions. However, Irene is sharper than he realizes. She reassures him that he needn't be nervous, clarifying that she isn't questioning his identity. Instead, she expresses a genuine curiosity about his past, what he did, and who he was before their paths crossed. After all, the moment he pledged his loyalty to the princess, he became her knight. With determination, she vows to take responsibility for who he is, promising to protect Gray from any abuse. Overwhelmed with emotion, Gray declares that the princess is a wonderful master, and he pledges his unwavering loyalty to her. As Irene reflects on their conversation, she realizes that Gray is quite easy to manage. However, she soon decides it's time to end their discussion. Noting that it has been a while since Horace left, she tells Gray that it's almost time to welcome her guest. Just as she finishes speaking, an intruder descends from the top of the tent. He swiftly identifies his target and declares his intention to begin his cleansing operation. The Crows, a notorious group of assassins from the southern region, are known for their ruthless efficiency. They will kill anyone who stands in their way. From the highest echelons of royalty to the frail and elderly among the Crows, an assassin named Spectre stands as the most feared of them all. While other assassins are driven by greed, Spectre is a monster who revels in the thrill of the kill. This time, his target is none other than Princess Irene, and he anticipates that this assignment will be more exhilarating than ever. Just as he approaches her, the princess's bodyguard intervenes, hurling his sword in Gray's direction. Gray realizes that the bodyguard is determined to eliminate anyone who dares to approach the princess. Witnessing this, Irene recognizes Gray's noble intentions but chides him gently, saying, "Swords are not meant to be thrown." With a hint of irony, Spectre remarks that the princess is having a splendid night. Yet, the protagonist stands resolute, ready to do anything to protect her. As the enemy locks eyes with Gray, a chill runs down his spine. He can't help but question the source of Gray's intense killing intent. Is he a lich, a necromancer, or perhaps he's simply a man who has taken countless lives before? The enemy strikes with such blinding speed that Gray barely registers his approach. Even the princess is taken aback, witnessing her bodyguard being struck down before her eyes. The assailant revels in his triumph, boasting about his victory. Yet, to his astonishment, Gray begins to laugh at the unfolding chaos. At first, Spectre is puzzled, but as he glances at his sword, the truth dawns on him. It shattered upon striking Gray. Confused, he wonders how that could have happened. The protagonist, sensing the shift in power, admits he felt fear when the enemy threatened to slice him into pieces. But now that the threat has proven empty, he boldly calls Spectre a liar. With a steely resolve, he adds that liars like him deserve a fitting punishment. Spectre scoffs at Gray's audacity, dismissing the attack as nothing more than a slap. He believes he can easily defend against such a feeble strike. However, to his astonishment, the impact is far more forceful than he anticipated. Confusion washes over him as he wonders what is happening. Meanwhile, the princess observes the scene with a mix of disbelief and concern. She realizes that neither of these two truly grasps the gravity of the situation, especially since she witnessed the assassin shatter his own sword with that very first move. The king wielded the power to secure the illegitimate son's claim to succession. Since the child was a boy, even the Grand Duke's will could not prevent him from inheriting the title, leaving Irene sidelined. It was clear, however, that this was a conspiracy. The king sought to seize the Becker family's territory without spilling a drop of blood. Some feared the king's authority, leaving no one willing to help, even when the truth was clear. Others, eager to seize an opportunity, sought to aid the feudal lords for their own gain. Ever since the day she lost her father, many had wished for the 16-year-old girl to vanish without a trace. Consequently, assassination attempts began to occur with alarming frequency. Back in the present, in the capital of the Becker Duchy, known as the White City, soldiers notice movement on the horizon. Dozens of horses gallop toward the fortress, and at the forefront rides Princess Irene. The soldiers cheer at her return, eagerly calling to open the gates. Among the crowd, a girl watches with a smile, remarking that, as expected, the princess has returned alive. She had heard whispers that Irene had discovered a brave knight during her journey to Hamlet Port. Curiosity piqued. She was determined to see for herself if the rumors about this knight were true. Moments later, Irene strode through the gates, flanked by her soldiers. The townsfolk greeted her return with cheers, but their excitement only grew when they caught sight of the Knight of the Silver Moon, the very hero who had vanquished 50 of the Count's foes. Meanwhile, the cat inquired if Gray had grasped what Irene had said the night before. With honesty, the protagonist admitted he hadn't understood much, as she had used numerous words beyond his comprehension. However, one thing was crystal clear. He needed to defeat the king, or he would lose the knight title he had fought so hard to earn. As he continues on his journey, he stumbles upon the palace, its grandeur leaving him utterly mesmerized. Along the way, he encounters people who are unlike anyone he has known before. The vibrant atmosphere filled with laughter and joy envelops him, and Gray can't help but express his comfort in this new environment. Hearing his words, Irene smiles and playfully replies that she'll take it as a compliment. She remarks that the White City is a vibrant place, and that's precisely why she feels compelled to protect it, ensuring it remains unchanged. As they continue their journey, she mentions that she will craft new armor for Gray as soon as they reach the castle and inquires if he has any specific requests. The protagonist finds himself at a loss for words. Irene continues, emphasizing that now that he is regarded as an important member of her family, his attire must reflect that status, and the armor should be crafted with care and style. The protagonist admits he doesn't know much about the matter, so he agrees to go along with whatever she prefers. The princess then adds that there's one more thing to consider. Once they settle in, she plans to host a grand banquet for the nobles, where dancing will be the highlight. After all, it's crucial to let everyone know that she has returned alive, along with her troops and horses. As a guardian knight, Irene invites Gray to dance, believing that many will want to meet him, and he must be ready for the attention. Meanwhile, high above the city, an angel watches intently, noting that the target has been identified, an immature lich. Now, the necessary steps must be set in motion. He also mentions that, according to the Greystone Treaty, the angels must sign with the liches before inflicting harm on the humans. They are required to observe the situation and refrain from any actions against it. Later, in his quarters, the protagonist stands before his new armor, admiring its magnificent design that resembles an ancient ruin. The cat is astonished that they merely measured the old armor and replicated it. Meanwhile, the protagonist remains oblivious to the irony, declaring that his lady is indeed very generous. Soon after, the cat reminds him that Irene has invited him to dance at the ball and asks if he's ready. Confused, Gray inquires, "What's a ball?" The cat explains, "It's a dancing banquet, a party where everyone gathers to dance." Gray inquires about the nature of dancing, prompting the cat to attempt a demonstration. As the feline moves, the protagonist mimics its steps, chuckling as he remarks that it resembles a mystical ritual. Despite this, he admits it's quite enjoyable. Just then, someone appears and asks Gray if he's ready. He gestures for the maid to hold on for a moment. After hastily donning his armor, he opens the door. The girl introduces herself as Princess Irene's maid, here to escort Gray to her, leading him through the palace corridors. They soon arrive at the princess's quarters. With a graceful bow, she announces the arrival of the Knight of the Silver Moon. As Gray steps inside, he is instantly captivated by the sight of her. The princess welcomes him warmly, then dismisses the maid with a gentle wave, leaving them alone. As the protagonist gazes at Irene, elegantly dressed, he finds himself captivated. He examines her outfit from top to bottom, marveling at the intricate details. The richness of the fabric overwhelms him, sparking thoughts of how sensational it would be as a mage's robe. In that moment, he becomes so entranced by the dress that he nearly forgets to appreciate Irene herself. The princess asks if he is ready, to which Gray replies affirmatively. Moments later, she invites him to walk down the stairs, extending her hand for him to take. However, Gray's unfamiliarity with such gestures holds him back. Confused, he turns to the cat and asks why Irene is just standing there when she promised they would descend the stairs together. The cat urges Gray to take her hand without hesitation. Confused, he wonders why, but she insists he stop questioning her and act quickly. Sensing the princess's growing impatience, Gray finally grasps her hand, and together they descend the stairs. Seizing the moment, he compliments her stunning dress. Irene expresses her gratitude to her knight for the compliment, but she is taken aback when he requests to wear her dress. Confused, the princess asks Gray what he truly wants. Undeterred, he insists on his request, asking again if he can don her gown. Irene hesitates, questioning whether he genuinely wants to wear a dress. Gray, unfazed, replies, "What's the problem?" The princess finally states that he is a man and shouldn't wear a dress, but Gray remains puzzled, wondering what could possibly stop him. The princess is left feeling perplexed, and Gray, too, is caught in a web of confusion. He struggles to grasp the intricacies of human customs. Just then, the cat approaches, warning him that his odd behavior will soon be revealed. In response, Gray quickly shifts the conversation, insisting that all he needs is his armor. Meanwhile, the princess can't help but notice that Gray has never removed his helmet or shared anything about his past, yet now he expresses a desire to try on a dress. The princess begins to wonder if, instead of Gray, he might actually be Grace. After this moment of contemplation, they present themselves to the others. A young man steps forward to announce the arrival of the princess, and she descends gracefully, hand in hand with her knight. Soon, they stand before the gathered guests who bow in respect, saluting the princess as she approaches. Not everyone, it seems, is pleased to see Gray. One man, aware of Gray's actions at the tournament, scowls at the sight of him with the princess. Meanwhile, Irene beams with delight. She warmly welcomes the guests, announcing that this is the 13th commemorative ball of the Becker family, and expresses her hope that everyone enjoys the festivities. She expresses her hope for a positive relationship with the other invited families and wishes to use this opportunity to address some lingering issues. Observing the princess's demeanor, the girl from earlier turns to her grandfather and whispers that Irene seems to be targeting him. Her grandfather, already aware, simply replies, "It's fine." The protagonist inquires about the princess's thoughts on him, to which she replies that he is Lord Gregory, the third of the Atwood lineage. His family is renowned for their storied military prowess, and he notably emerged as the first candidate to triumph in battle against the king. However, Gregory chooses to decline the princess's invitation. Curious, he asks if she feels disappointed by his decision, but the princess assures him that it's perfectly fine. With that, she strides over to Gregory, a spark of hope in her eyes. "The fact that you're here tonight means I still have a chance to convince you," she says earnestly. Approaching the man, she greets him warmly, calling him uncle. Gregory smiles, noting, "It's been a while since I last saw you." Irene then extends her hand, inviting him to be her first dance partner. "Would you do me the honor?" she asks. With a grin, her uncle replies, "It would be my pleasure." As Gray takes the princess's hand, he can't help but wonder why they are so close. Just then, his granddaughter appears, her eyes sparkling with excitement. "Just like you two," she says with a bright smile. "I want to dance too." She eagerly invites Gray to be her partner, filling the moment with warmth and joy. The protagonist is taken aback by the unexpected invitation. The girl, however, is unwavering in her determination to have him as her partner. Extending her hand in a gesture reminiscent of the princess, she smiles and expresses her desire to be his dance companion. Once again, Gray finds himself utterly bewildered. He turns to the cat, seeking clarity. "Why is this girl offering her hand to me?" he asks, his confusion palpable. He suspects she might have fractured her ankle, marveling at how she could dance so effortlessly despite the pain. The cat, however, insists that's not the issue. She simply wants to dance. Yet, he advises the protagonist to maintain some distance from her. Taking the advice literally, Gray steps back. The cat quickly clarifies, "That's not what I meant. You shouldn't distance yourself physically." The little girl's sorrowful demeanor tugs at the heartstrings as she cries out, asking why her invitation was turned down and if the knight doesn't find her beautiful enough. The cat, observing the scene, can't help but think that this girl certainly knows how to pull at one's heart. He urges Gray to intervene quickly, warning that if he doesn't, things might take a turn for the worse. The crowd buzzes with curiosity, questioning why anyone would reject a request from Miss Shelley, renowned as the most beautiful girl in the world. Gray steps forward, asserting that he has no issue with her looks, insisting it was merely a misunderstanding. With a charming smile, he extends his hand to her, inviting her to dance. After the moment, he glances down at the cat beside him and asks, "Did I do the right thing?" The cat admits he has no escape and will have to dance to the music now. Shelley rises to her feet, declaring it an honor to accept the invitation. Inside, she revels in the moment, feeling that she's finally achieved her goal, even if it comes with a hint of humiliation. Curiosity piques her interest. She wonders what he looks like without the helmet. Meanwhile, the cat considers that this girl might just have the power to manipulate Gray, but he knows she'll pay the price later for making a fool like him dance. As their dance begins, Shelley quickly voices her frustration, complaining that Gray keeps stepping on her feet. The atmosphere grows tense, and the protagonist offers a sheepish apology, admitting it's his first time dancing. Shelley responds with a wry smile, revealing that it's also her first experience dancing with a man in armor. She encourages Gray not to rush, but insists he needs to take the lead. However, the protagonist counters her suggestion, saying, "You dance far better than I do. Perhaps you should guide me instead." The girl insists that it's not about who dances better. It's the man's responsibility to lead the lady in a dance. The protagonist can't help but wonder why she and the princess refer to him as a man, questioning whether he truly fits that description. Regardless, he admits that dancing is a lot of fun. Shelley nods in agreement, adding that it serves as excellent training. As he observes the dance, Gregory notes that this is the famed Knight of the Silver Moon, a figure rumored to possess incredible strength and perform remarkable feats. He questions why he's wearing armor at a ball. The princess replies that it's simply a knight's habit. Then, shifting the conversation, she asks if Gregory might reconsider her request. Gregory acknowledges her talent as a leader over the past 2 months, admitting she has shown great promise. However, he adds that while she is impressive, she still falls short. He firmly states that his family's ancestral motto is to support only those destined for victory. That is the reason they have endured for centuries. Upon hearing this, Irene feels a wave of sorrow. Meanwhile, the protagonist catches the attention of a girl who praises his growth, but she quickly adds that it's dull to linger in the hall for too long. With a bright smile, she invites him to take a walk instead. As they exit the castle, Shelley takes a moment to rest her swollen feet. With a sigh, she admits that she won't be able to dance anymore if this keeps up. She playfully blames the protagonist for stepping on her foot, causing her discomfort. Gray, filled with regret, quickly apologizes, but Shelley isn't looking for apologies. She wants something to ease her pain. "Could you find me some ointment or something?" she asks, a hint of desperation in her voice. The cat observes that a girl is flirting with Gray, but he's completely oblivious to it. To clarify, the cat explains what flirting is, but adds a serious note. If Gray were to pursue anything romantic at his age, he could find himself in serious trouble. Confused, Gray asks what reproducing means, prompting the cat to decide it's best to hold off on that explanation for now. Even without fully grasping the situation, he knows he must tend to her injury. Shelley flinches slightly as Gray takes hold of her foot, but he quickly channels his magic to heal her. As the pain fades, she gazes at him in awe, her eyes sparkling with wonder. "Can a knight really use magic?" she asks, her curiosity piqued. Just then, a young man approaches, his expression one of disbelief as he takes in the extraordinary scene before him. He claims he searched for Shelley out of concern, but he can hardly believe another man was holding her foot. With a mix of indignation and disbelief, he questions whether all the knights of the Becker family are so shameless, even going so far as to challenge Gray to a duel. Just as Gray is about to accept, his cat intervenes. Gray explains that Irene is attempting to win the support of the girl's family, and engaging in a fight with someone connected to her would only create political complications. The cat attempts to assist Gray in explaining himself, but Shelley steps in, effortlessly charming everyone around her. This leaves the cat puzzled, wondering what her true intentions are. Meanwhile, from above, an angel observing the scene notes that the magic being used is divine in nature. Curiously, the angel questions whether an undead being is truly capable of wielding such power. Inside the castle, the princess hears a commotion and wonders what could be happening. Just then, someone appears, reporting that something unusual is unfolding outside. The Knight of the Silver Moon has allegedly insulted Lady Shelley of the Gregory family. Irene senses that this can't be mere coincidence. Determined to uncover the truth, she decides to investigate the situation for herself. The boy infatuated with Shelley confronts Gray, demanding an explanation. Caught off guard, Gray struggles to find the right words, only heightening the boy's suspicion. In front of the gathered crowd, the boy insists that Gray clarify why he humiliated Lady Shelley. Confused, Gray turns to the cat for guidance, pondering what he could have possibly done to provoke such a reaction from this troublesome boy. Since the protagonist remains silent, the boy turns to Shelley and asks her to speak up. She clarifies that the boy has misunderstood. The Knight of the Silver Moon was merely assisting her with her foot injury. The boy retorts that Shelley is only hurting herself by defending him, insisting that no medicine can heal someone instantly without leaving a mark. He accuses Gray of being nothing more than a deceiver. Amidst the swirling confusion, whispers begin to circulate, casting shadows on the protagonist's reputation. Overwhelmed, he turns to the cat, bewildered, and asks why everyone is using such complex words that leave him in the dark. The cat, with a serious glint in its eye, responds that this is indeed his greatest dilemma. If he doesn't clarify things soon, his reputation could be shattered, and the stakes might even lead to his demise. Amidst the chaos, the princess steps forward, her voice cutting through the noise. What is happening here? Gray's heart lifts at her arrival, feeling as though he spotted a beacon of hope. Please, I need your help. Everyone is saying things I don't understand. The troublesome boy interjects, his tone dripping with disdain. This night is unacceptable. Irene narrows her eyes, seeking clarity. What's going on? Elk, eager to share his side, responds. I went to the garden and saw this knight flirting with Shelley. Gregory turns to his granddaughter, concern etched on his face. Were you harmed by the knight? He asks, his voice heavy with worry. The princess, sensing the tension, gently urges her uncle to relax. Let Gray explain, she says, her tone soothing. The protagonist takes a breath, ready to clarify. I accidentally stepped on Shelley's foot while we were dancing, he admits, a hint of embarrassment creeping into his voice. I didn't mean to hurt her, I was just trying to help with her injury. Irene turns to Shelley, questioning if that's truly what happened. To her surprise, Shelley nods in agreement. However, she then insists that Gray demonstrate his magic once more in front of everyone to validate his claims. Gray, however, shakes his head, explaining that he cannot perform the spell again so soon. Using divine magic has taken a toll on him. As an undead, he has injured himself and needs time to recover before attempting it again. After all, he can hardly control his armor at this point. His excuse fails to convince the troublesome boy, who boldly accuses Gray of coercing Shelley into supporting his tale. The girl's grandfather, swayed by this narrative, instructs Irene to rein in her knight before seeking his assistance. The princess offers an apology to her uncle, but stands firm in her trust for Gray. She declares that she will personally uncover the truth, vowing not to let a liar escape unpunished. If she finds someone tarnishing the Becker family name, that person will pay dearly. The troublesome boy trembles at her words. Gregory interjects, suggesting that it would be best for the princess to steer clear of his family's affairs and to call Shelley to leave with him. The morning after the ball, a troop marches toward the castle. Horace announces that Count Felder has arrived with his army, and he confidently asserts that with the military strength of the 3 counts of the Becker Duchy now in the White City, the situation is decidedly in their favor. However, the princess, still reeling from her recent return to the city, can't shake the feeling that Edward Felder's arrival is too coincidental. She inquires about the identity of the man who accused Gray the previous night. Horace explains that it was Matthew from the Modine family, one of Shelley's most ardent admirers, and adds that Matthew's accusations stemmed purely from jealousy. Irene, satisfied for now, decides it's time to greet Count Felder. She approaches the gate to speak with her uncle Felder. He inquires if he is very late, to which she replies that this is the perfect time. Changing the subject, he asks if Gregory has made his opposition clear. The princess nods and recounts the details of their conversation. Felder chuckles, remarking that the old man is indeed grumpy, and even suggests they might need to force him to join their side. Irene firmly states that she doesn't want to pursue that path. Felder, attempting to lighten the mood, insists he was only joking and reassures her not to worry. With a hint of exasperation, Irene remarks that her uncle is as playful as ever. Shifting to a more serious tone, Felder expresses his concern, noting that for some, reason is a foreign concept. He fears that Gregory will only come to this realization when it's far too late. The princess expresses her gratitude to her uncle for his wise counsel. However, before moving on, she inquires about the contents of the carriage. Her uncle explains that it belongs to his son, little Jimmy. He adds that the boy isn't well and has been advised to avoid sunlight for his health. Bringing him along is a precaution. It's safer to keep him close rather than leave him alone at home. Irene inquires if she can meet the boy, and Felder nods in agreement, allowing her to approach the carriage. One of the guards then informs the boy that the princess wishes to see him. As he steps forward, he introduces himself as Jimmy Felder. Irene, feeling a twinge of guilt, apologizes for the troubles she caused his father. Jimmy reassures her, saying it's perfectly fine and that everything was ultimately his father's decision. After their encounter, Irene remarks that her uncle has a very cute son. The boy's father chuckles, noting that everyone seems to say the same after meeting his boy. Given their long journey, the princess graciously invites them into the castle. Once inside the meeting room, Horace comments that Felder's assistance is yet another advantage for her. And with that, the situation has taken a turn for the better. However, the princess appears far from satisfied. Forrest senses her unease and offers his assistance. Irene confides in him, expressing her discomfort with the timing of Felder's arrival. She finds it suspicious that he has suddenly appeared, especially with a son who is charming in appearance, yet bears no resemblance to his father. More importantly, she can't shake the feeling about the boy's striking white hair. Elsewhere in the castle, Matthew Modine strides through the corridors until he arrives at Felder's quarters. The Count, already aware of the boy's actions, inquires about his presence. Matthew offers an apology, expressing disbelief that Irene would stand up for the Knight of the Silver Moon. Desperation creeping into his voice, he pleads for another chance, vowing to remove that knight from the Becker family's guard. In the protagonist's room, he diligently scribes a list, piquing the curiosity of his cat. Grace observes, noting that he's outlining his duties as a knight. During the knighthood ceremony, Miss Irene had him recite vows that resonated deeply: to bravely combat tyranny and all forms of evil, to protect the defenseless and aid those in need, to never harm a woman, and to support his fellow knights. He vowed to remain true to his friends, loving them fiercely until the end of his days. Grace notes that leeches and demons rarely make vows, but when they do, they honor them with unwavering commitment. He understands the weight of his promises and resolves to fulfill them without delay. With a determined spirit, he sets off through the White City, eager to assist anyone in need. The cat advises against venturing into the city, but the protagonist is puzzled by the warning until a tomato splats against him. It becomes clear that Grace's reputation has taken a nosedive. Many now view him as a notorious scoundrel, someone unworthy of walking the city streets, labeled as a manipulator of young girls. Confused, Gray wonders why the people's perception of him has shifted so dramatically. The cat insists that he doesn't take the rumors personally. He explains that after the ball, whispers began to circulate about him throughout the White City, but it wasn't an attack. It originated from the Becker family. This is why people perceive Gray negatively. Because of these unfounded rumors, the protagonist feels a pang of guilt, but the cat tries to reassure him. It's better to let them believe the rumors, he says, especially when they don't care to seek the truth. From a distance, the mastermind behind the rumors observes Gray. His friend notes that the knight possesses a remarkably strong mind, remaining unfazed by the chaos around him. However, Matthew dismisses this, revealing that a group is poised to take him down. As the protagonist navigates the bustling streets, he remarks on the lively atmosphere, though he can't shake off the peculiar glances directed his way. The cat urges Gray to return to the princess and relay the news. Just then, a boy rushes up, calling for him and seeking the aid of the white-armored knight. Seizing this chance to prove himself, Gray confidently replies that no matter the problem, he is ready to help the boy. However, the cat scolds him, insisting he should listen to the request before agreeing. A crowd gathers, blocking the streets. Meanwhile, Shelley, trapped in her carriage, inquires about the commotion. Her driver informs her that it concerns the Knight of the Silver Moon. Back with the protagonist, he realizes the boy's sister has been captured by bandits, who are now demanding he locate the knight. The cat warns Gray that this is clearly a trap and urges him not to go. However, the protagonist insists that the boy asked for his help, and he cannot simply stand by and do nothing. Upon arriving, a group of boys exclaims that the knight has actually shown up, calling him an idiot in the process. Gray, puzzled, mentions he heard something about bandits, but all he sees before him are just a bunch of kids. The boy insists that he has fulfilled their agreement and demands his sister's return. The kidnapper smirks, claiming to be a man of his word, and hurls the girl toward the ground with reckless abandon. Panic washes over her brother as he watches, but the protagonist swiftly intervenes, catching her just in time. After ensuring she's safe, Gray looks at her with concern and asks, "Are you okay?" She nods, relief evident in her voice as she replies, "Yes." He gently sets her down and asks if all the boys who tried to set him up are unarmed. The gang leader chuckles at the absurdity of it all, while the boy who led the protagonist there offers a quick apology, claiming he's acting out of fear. In an instant, he raises his voice for everyone to hear, accusing the Knight of the Silver Moon of attempting to kidnap someone. The leader of the kidnapped girl steps forward, demanding that Gray release her. Confusion washes over the protagonist as he struggles to understand the unfolding situation. Suddenly, a group of furious townsfolk encircles him, their intentions clear as they attempt to drag him from his horse. Gray stands firm, insisting, "I didn't do anything wrong." The little girl, playing the role of bait, skillfully convinces everyone that she is in grave danger. Meanwhile, her brother slips away, making his way into a shadowy alley. The gang leader contacts him, instructing the boy to update the others, promising that this job will bring in a substantial reward. Though he feels a twinge of sympathy for the knight, the allure of the reward looms larger in his mind. Just as he was about to report, Shelley arrives, catching him red-handed. She asserts that the boy knows exactly what he's doing is wrong. When he asks who she is, Shelley dismisses the question, insisting it's irrelevant. Instead, she inquires about the young master who promised to pay for this service. Overwhelmed with fear, the boy begins to cry. The protagonist finds himself increasingly uneasy in this tense situation. Captured by the townspeople, he faces their relentless scorn, as they firmly believe he is a villain. Even the cat, caught in the chaos, shares the blame. As he is led away, the crowd erupts with a flurry of absurd accusations against Gray, insisting that Princess Irene must intervene in his case. Suddenly, a surprising figure emerges from the chaos. Shelley, the leader of the riot, is taken aback, recognizing her as the girl from the rumors. Confusion flickers across his face as he wonders what a noble is doing in such a tumultuous scene. Shelley, unfazed, inquires about the large gathering. The leader responds, his voice filled with determination, that they are about to teach a lesson to the knight who dared to intimidate her. Soon after, she inquires if they are talking about the Silver Moon Knight. If that's the case, she insists they are mistaken, as this knight did not mistreat her. Instead, he helped her. The leader of the movement challenges her, stating that everyone in town has a different story. To make matters worse, he reveals that this knight was recently caught attempting to kidnap a little girl. Upon hearing this, Shelley requests to meet the so-called little girl. A woman then steps forward, presenting the child and assuring Shelley that she can ask anything, and the girl will confirm the story. Intrigued, Shelley approaches the girl, who begins to speak, sharing a flurry of details. But then, with a knowing look, Shelley reveals the truth. This child is nothing more than a con artist. She reveals to everyone that it wasn't a girl at all, but rather a boy in disguise wearing a wig. The crowd is left in stunned silence, grappling with the unexpected truth. Shelley, seizing the moment, declares that they have been duped by a scam artist. With a commanding tone, she instructs her soldier to gather the others as well. Moments later, the entire gang arrives, exactly the same group Shelley had mentioned. They sheepishly admit that they were merely victims of their own prank, having heard the rumors and thought it would be funny. As the truth sinks in, the crowd begins to realize they had nearly harmed an innocent person, their embarrassment palpable. Shelley declares that they are being manipulated for nefarious purposes and commands them to release the knight. She reminds them that when Princess Irene bestowed the title of knight upon Gray, she also granted him the titles of baronet and thief. In other words, they have unjustly insulted the honor of a baron, and as such, he is entitled to exact punishment on each of them. Fear grips everyone as they scramble to justify their actions. Gray, contemplating their fate, questions whether he should indeed punish them. Shelley firmly asserts that he should. Having insulted his honor as a knight, Gray resolves to deliver justice. Panic ensues as they beg for forgiveness, vowing it will never happen again. But Gray's response is unwavering. It's too late for mercy, and criminals cannot plead for compassion. But Gray has a plan. He alters the sign the crowd made him carry, declaring that they must now bear this sign wherever he goes. Only then will they be forgiven. The people are taken aback, their disbelief palpable. Even Shelley can't help but admire his audacity. With a hint of amusement, she remarks that Gray is quite the comedian. Believing he's cleverly diffusing the situation with humor, Gray solemnly declares that he will honor his knight's word, offering forgiveness to those who heed his commands. Observing from above, Felder turns to Matthew and remarks, "This is what happens when you give someone a second chance." Once the turmoil subsides and the misunderstandings are cleared, Gray expresses his gratitude to Shelley for her assistance. She humbly replies that she did nothing extraordinary, merely repaying a previous favor. Shelley suggested that it would be wise for Gray to report this matter to the princess. Though she kept quiet in front of everyone, she revealed that the one who framed him was none other than the young Master Matthew from the internal Becker camp. He had approached her at the ball, and Shelley fears that Matthew's true intention was to drive a wedge between Gray and Irene, making him a target for investigation. The cat, observing the situation, remarked on the girl's peculiar behavior, recalling that her family had previously refused to align with the Beckers. Curiosity piqued. He wondered why she was so determined to help Gray. Gray questions her, and Shelley responds that getting too close could drag her family into a war. Yet she feels there's no harm in sharing this information with Gray. This only heightens the cat's suspicions about her. As she prepares to leave, she advises Gray to go to Irene and report everything. He bids her farewell, but just before she departs, he catches a glimpse of movement nearby. Suddenly, Matthew steps out from a shadowy alley, attempting to kidnap Shelley in the glaring light of day. Her guards quickly catch sight of the unfolding chaos. With a menacing glare, Matthew warns them to stay back, threatening to kill the princess if they dare approach. Startled by his abrupt appearance, Shelley's eyes widen in shock, and Matthew can't help but notice the surprise etched across her face. Matthew insists he did everything in his power to shield her from the war, but he believes Shelley's mistake was meddling where she had no place. He feels abandoned by his lord and places the blame squarely on Shelley. In his eyes, she not only aided a random knight, but also dragged her family into a conflict they never wished to join. The guards, overhearing his accusations, exchange incredulous glances, dismissing him as mad. Matthew admits he's indeed lost his mind. Despite his failure to sow discord, he believes that eliminating that foolish knight will earn him a warm welcome back from the Lord. Aware of the knight's strength, he declares that he'll let Shelley go if Gray manages to tear off one of his arms or legs. Shelley shakes her head, declaring Matthew truly insane. She insists that Gray isn't her subordinate and wouldn't resort to such brutality for her sake. Despite the circumstances, Matthew insists that Gray must sacrifice himself, asserting that a true knight cannot simply stand by and watch a lady perish. Understanding the weight of this demand, Gray responds resolutely, declaring that if sacrifice is required, he is willing to lose an arm to save Shelley. He insists it's just an arm and a leg, and after tearing off his own arm, he warns Matthew to keep his word. Shelley's guards stand in stunned silence at Gray's shocking act. Even the supposed villain is taken aback, declaring that Gray is the true lunatic among them. The protagonist insists he isn't crazy, he's a true knight. In a shocking display, he hurls his own amputated arm at Matthew. As Matthew crashes to the ground, the guards swiftly pin him down. Meanwhile, Shelley gazes at the severed arm, only to realize it's nothing more than an empty piece of armor. Gray reveals that he concealed his real arm within the armor, ensuring the enemy remained unaware. Shelley praises his cleverness, expressing her gratitude once more for saving her life. Gray humbly replies that he merely fulfilled his duty as a knight. Meanwhile, Matthew, still lying on the ground, scoffs and asks if Gray believes he is safe simply because he defeated him. He insists that everything is Shelley's fault. If she hadn't intervened that night, her family wouldn't be in this predicament. When the day arrives, she will find herself holding her grandfather's lifeless body, weeping in regret for all that has transpired. Meanwhile, someone stirs awake after being knocked out. A group of bandits remarks that he has finally come to. It's revealed that Gregory has been captured by them, and they loom over him menacingly, ready to threaten him further. They say this mansion is perfectly situated, isolated from prying eyes. The guards, too, are notoriously weak, granting ample time for conversation before anyone notices. Gregory, ever the pragmatist, inquires about the topic at hand. One of the captors smirks and asks if the old man isn't curious about their identities or the reason behind his abduction. Gregory replies coolly, "What's the point in asking if you won't answer? Besides, I'm not the one begging for a chat." The bandit leader smirks, noting the old man's confidence, but quickly dismisses idle chatter. With a swift motion, he hurls a knife at Gregory, yet the old man remains utterly unfazed. The bandit then declares that Gregory will pen a letter to the thief, requesting troops to aid the Becker family against the king. Confused, Gregory struggles to grasp the meaning behind this unexpected demand. This bandit isn't even one of Irene's men, yet he dismisses the old man's concerns, insisting that all Gregory needs to do is send a letter. Despite the threat looming over him, Gregory stands firm in his refusal. The bandit smirks, asserting that even his noble title of count won't save him now. He threatens to kill everyone in the mansion if the old man refuses to write the letter. However, Gregory counters that, if he dies, the bandit will lose his seal. With Gregory's death, his son would inherit his title, and a will approved by the archbishop is unassailable even by the king himself. Gregory then questions how Felder could send such a fool to kidnap him, suggesting that the bandit should seek better instructions from his boss on handling a situation like this. This leaves the bandit seething with irritation. Meanwhile, at Becker Castle, Irene speaks with her uncle about the urgent need to discuss troop distribution and their formation against the king. Just then, a messenger bursts into the room, announcing he has an important message for Lord Felder. Felder requests a moment of leave and steps outside to uncover the reason for the sudden message. Meanwhile, Irene ponders the implications of this unexpected news. She turns to Roberts, instructing him to send Horace and a few other men to follow her uncle's messenger. As Felder reads the newly arrived letter, he realizes, as anticipated, that Gregory has discovered he was the one behind it all. Afterward, he instructs the messenger to return and inform the others to follow the plan. As long as they comply, there's no need to worry about the old man revealing their secrets. Moments later, he re-enters the meeting room. Irene inquires about what transpired, but Felder dismisses it as unimportant, merely a trivial letter from the thief. The princess keeps her composure, yet deep down she doubts his explanation. By the way, she mentions that she forgot to bring up an important detail. Due to the ongoing war preparations, White City is currently under martial law. Without the princess's explicit orders, the city gates are strictly closed at night. This piques her curiosity about how her uncle's messenger managed to enter the city, prompting her to question him directly. Meanwhile, at Gregory's mansion, one of the bandits voices his frustration, wondering why the messenger has yet to return after such a long time. As he gazes out the window, he informs his boss that someone has returned. But it's not the messenger, it's a girl. The boss replies, "That's Shelly, a member of the old man's family." Shelly steps inside, announcing her return, but as she looks down the corridor ahead, she notices it's shrouded in darkness, not a single candle flickering to light the way. Despite her expectations, no one came to greet her. She recalled warning her grandfather not to trust the maids from White City, and she resolved to fire them all later. Just then, the leader of the bandits emerged from the shadows, swiftly capturing her. With a sinister grin, he proclaimed, "This is a true gift from the gods." Gregory's eyes widen in shock as he spots his granddaughter before him, her mouth gagged, rendering her unable to speak. The gang leader smirks, noting that convincing the old man has proven difficult, but with the girl now in play, everything has changed. He leans in, tauntingly reminding Gregory that the entire city knows just how much he dotes on her. Simney then interjects, his voice dripping with menace, asking if the old man understands what fate awaits her if he refuses to write the letter. Gregory warns the bandit that if he lays a finger on his granddaughter, he will tear him apart. The bandit smirks, tauntingly declaring that in Gregory's current state, he could do anything he wanted to the girl right before him, and the old man would be powerless to stop it. He adds that beyond being tied up, Gregory is just an old man, barely able to defend himself without risking injury. Afterward, he removes Shelly's gag, insisting that without it, the old man would hear her screams. But instead of crying out in fear, Shelly boldly calls the bandit an idiot, dismissing his threats as absurd. She points out that he clearly has no experience in intimidation, and suggests that his boss has a poor eye for selecting competent bandits. In a fit of anger, he strikes Shelly and snaps at her to be quiet. With a sarcastic smirk, the bandit remarks that she's just like her grandfather, adorable on the outside, but with a fierce spirit underneath. He then declares that he will demonstrate whether his threats hold any weight. Unfazed, Shelly stands her ground, prompting the bandit to label her as stubborn. Just as he was about to act, the protagonist's cat suddenly appeared, leaping into the fray. With a swift scratch across his face, the feline thwarted his intentions, protecting the girl. To make matters even more surprising, the cat called out for Gray. In an instant, a magical portal opened up beneath them. The gang leader stood there, utterly bewildered, like a blind man caught in the chaos of a shootout. In a flashback, we see Shelly and the protagonist, Gray, strategizing before their mission. Gray proposes a bold plan to storm the mansion and rescue everyone inside. However, Shelly counters, explaining that the mansion is vast, filled with countless rooms, making it nearly impossible to pinpoint her grandfather's location. Pondering their options, Gray asks how they should proceed. Shelly then suggests a daring alternative. She would enter alone and allow herself to be captured. This way, she could be taken directly to her grandfather, giving Gray the opportunity to find a way in afterward. The protagonist lamented that his armor was both heavy and noisy, making stealth impossible. However, if he could pinpoint the right location, he could make his way there, provided she could keep the cat with her. The cat, clearly unimpressed, protested, not wanting to be used as bait. Undeterred, the protagonist explained that he only needed the cat to wear the amulet around its neck. This device, stolen from the LICH, held the key to their plan. Once she located Gregory, he would simply toss the amulet to the ground and call out Gray's name. Back in the present, the bandit is left bewildered, questioning how someone could materialize out of thin air like that. Shelly, recalling Gray's past displays of magic, concludes that this must indeed be sorcery. The protagonist, embodying the Silver Moon Knight, in the name of the Holy Spirit, proclaims with conviction that ultimately, all sins will be purged and every soul will rise. He asserts that where sunlight shines, shadows cannot linger. With unwavering resolve, he vows to deliver justice against their foes. From above, the angel watches the protagonist intently. As a messenger of the divine spirit, he often traverses this road, but today, he is particularly struck by what he witnesses. The protagonist has materialized before his foes, instilling a palpable fear in their hearts. One of the bandits nervously approaches his leader, whispering, "That's the Silver Moon Knight, the one who's been making headlines for his heroic feats." The boss taunts the knight, questioning whether he feels fear. He declares that even a strong knight is still just one man and commands his gang to attack all at once. As the bandits surge forward, Gray remains calm, waiting for them to close in. He hardly flinches as they strike, employing clever tactics to turn the tide of battle in his favor. The moment the enemy steps into Gray's range, he strikes with his sword, sending the foe flying. Their boss, visibly irritated, reassures his men not to fear, insisting that the knight relies solely on physical strength. He believes that once they surround him, victory will be theirs. Yet, the protagonist has a different perspective. As the enemy closes in, the bandit leader finds his hand ensnared by a magical chain, rendering him immobile. With no skill in close combat, Gray pours all his energy into his magic, unleashing a torrent of spells against the foes. One by one, they fall before his might, and soon, he stands victorious, the battlefield quiet once more. At last, Shelley and her grandfather are free, able to converse without restraint. Yet, Gregory's mind lingers on Gray, the one who stirred trouble with his granddaughter at Irene's ball. The sudden appearance of Gray, coupled with the enchanted, light-infused chains used in their confrontation, piques the old man's curiosity even further. Gregory believes that the only human in this world capable of wielding magic freely is a paladin of the Sacred Order. If Irene has indeed earned their favor, it's understandable that she would want to keep it a secret. This realization prompts Gregory to reconsider the Becker family and the princess's abilities. Meanwhile, the protagonist inquires about what should be done with the bandits. Shelley confidently assures the bandit that she'll handle the situation. But before she proceeds, she inquires if the leader's name is Eddie Daniel. The bandit, taken aback, asks how she knows that. With a sly smile, Shelley replies that she knows many things after all. As a free woman, she has the freedom to uncover all sorts of peculiar information these days. She adds that she's aware Daniel's sister is the same age as her and lives at number 38 on Sephora Street, and that his mother is blind. Daniel, filled with desperation, pleads with Shelley not to harm his family, insisting they have no involvement in his business dealings. Shelley, maintaining her composure, reassures him that she has no intention of targeting them. After all, they've done nothing to her. However, she raises a critical question. What will become of the witnesses who were instructed to attack her family? With the mission now a failure, she points out that she knows who Daniel is and has gathered information about his family. This means that whoever orchestrated this must be aware as well. Shelley presents Daniel with two grim choices: reveal the identity of his informant or face death alongside the damning evidence against him. Daniel responds, knowing that opposing the contractor would mean not only his own demise, but also the destruction of his family. He pleads with Shelley to honor her word and spare his loved ones. In a moment of desperation, he bites down on his own tongue, choosing pain over betrayal, determined to keep the truth buried. Shelley initially finds his chosen method of escape pathetic, but then she notices something unusual. Her grandfather informs her that the Becker family is outside, ready to handle the situation. He adds that Irene is quick to act. It seems she has been tracking the messenger sent to the thief. With a sense of urgency, he suggests they go meet the Beckers, insisting there's no reason to delay any longer. Now, it's time for Irene to confront her uncle once more. She looks at Felder, her eyes narrowing with curiosity. "Do you have something to tell me?" she asks, her tone laced with anticipation. Felder finds himself cornered, struggling to find the right words. "For some people," he begins, "reason makes no sense. It's only when they get hurt that they truly understand the right path." Irene's expression hardens. "I never asked for your interference in my relationship with Gregory," she retorts, her voice steady. Yet Felder, undeterred, attempts to deflect the blame. "But you thanked me for my help," he insists, convinced he acted in her best interest. "I thought I was doing the right thing. Surely the old Gregory will come around." Felder draws a comparison between Irene and her father, noting that supporting her comes with significant risks. He reminds her that during her moments of weakness, he did many things to help her, suggesting that she should show more gratitude. In response, the princess reflects on the day's lessons and quietly exits the meeting room. Outside, Roberts informs the princess that Felder is nothing but a fool. After sending a letter in support of the Becker family, the old count orchestrated an accident to make it appear as though the Beckers were responsible, all to manipulate the Gregory family. He also reminds Felder to be more courteous and not to demand gratitude from the princess. However, Irene tells her soldier to calm down, explaining that attacking Felder now would jeopardize the fragile alliance they've just formed. If Felder has a hidden agenda, it will likely be something that brings him joy when revealed. With that settled, she turns her attention to Gregory, asking if he is all right. The soldier nods in agreement, acknowledging Gray's decisive actions that saved the old man from peril. Meanwhile, the princess approaches Gregory, her voice laced with regret as she apologizes for arriving so late. Gregory reassures her, saying it's all right, and then inquires if she has spoken with Felder. Yes, the princess replies, detailing Felder's entire plan. She adds a significant observation. The boy bears no resemblance to his father, leading both of them to suspect that he might actually be the king's illegitimate son, someone who is being discreetly protected. Gregory questions why Felder would bring the child to White City, and Irene shares his confusion. Now, all they can do is watch as events unfold. Meanwhile, Felder enters his chambers, only to find the boy waiting for him. The child asks why Felder has come to see him at this hour. It doesn't take long for him to realize that Felder might be in trouble. Felder observes the boy's keen insight and bows respectfully, apologizing for their meeting under such circumstances. Jimmy, not one for formality, dismisses the apology, expressing his discomfort with such gestures. Instead, he inquires about the situation that brought Felder to seek his assistance. The Count reveals that the issue at hand is the Silver Moon Knight, the one responsible for thwarting his plans since the incident at Hamlet Port. He describes himself as a peculiar individual, with no one truly aware of his origins. While his childish behavior often catches people's attention, what stands out even more is his remarkable resilience. He remains unfazed by gossip and possesses immense power, ready to take on 100 men if the situation demands it. Above all, his unwavering loyalty to the princess complicates any thoughts of opposing her. Realizing that Felder wants the knight out of the way, Jimmy agrees to assist him, taking on a shadowy form. His curiosity about this enigmatic figure drives him forward. Even a seasoned war veteran like Felder is unsettled by Jimmy's dark appearance, yet he welcomes the assistance he desperately needs. Not far from the scene, a bat is captured, prompting an angel to announce that a new target has been confirmed, a lesser vampire. Eager to act, she requests permission to eliminate it. However, her leader denies her request, reminding her that she must adhere to the LICH protocol. Until the opposing side takes a human life, she can only observe. Frustrated, the angel blames her mentor, accusing him of being overly protective of these divergents. She can't shake her worry about what kind of creature might emerge now that both a LICH and a vampire are in play. Bound by their agreement, they can only observe the divergence without intervening. The teacher urges Catherine to remain calm, reminding her that it is her duty to uphold the rules. The following day at the city palace, the princess convenes the counts to discuss the defense alignment. Felder speaks up, suggesting that with Gregory's army, they could establish a more extensive defensive line. The old man expresses his willingness to stretch the defensive line, but firmly states he doesn't want his army on par with Felder's. Tensions rise as they exchange jabs. Despite their agreement to fight side by side, their mutual dislike is palpable. Just then, Jimmy appears, seeking his father's attention. Felder, ever the attentive parent, gently admonishes the boy, reminding him that he should be in his room instead of wandering about. Jimmy, like any normal boy, pleads with his father to play with him. However, Felder dismisses him, claiming he's too busy, and instructs Jimmy to find someone else. Undeterred, Jimmy points directly at the protagonist and declares he wants to play with that knight. Moments later, they find themselves deep within a dungeon. Confused, Gray asks, "I thought we were just going to play. Why are we heading into the depths of the castle?" "Don't worry, we're almost there," Jimmy reassures him. Upon their arrival, he proudly declares, "Welcome to the underground park. No one will bother us here." Shelley raises an eyebrow, retorting, "Actually, this looks more like the city dungeon. Why did you bring us here?" Jimmy shoots her a warning glance. "Mind your words. I only invited the Silver Moon Knight, but it seems I got a busybody instead." She claims she was simply bored, which is why she chose to join them. Jimmy, after some hesitation, finally concedes, saying that if she's so determined, she can participate. He introduces a game called The Fearless. Legend has it that long ago, an evil dragon resided in the dungeons, having kidnapped the white-haired princess from the city, igniting the fury of the townspeople. At last, the fearless hero triumphed, slaying the dragon, and that's why he believes this story is truly remarkable. Seizing the moment, Jimmy activates one of his abilities, the illusionist's eye. With a sly grin, he declares his intention to ensnare the two within his tail, casting Shelley as the fearless hero and the knight as the fearsome dragon. From this moment on, they are destined to become mortal enemies, locked in a battle that cannot be avoided. The protagonist steps forward, drawing his sword, prepared for the impending clash. Shelley is now his foe, but before the fight begins, he pauses to speak. With a determined gaze, he declares that he doesn't want to be the dragon in this story. Instead, he asks if he can be the fearless hero. Jimmy is taken aback, questioning why his trance magic failed to affect the knight. He reflects on how his spells have never faltered against a human before, pondering if the knight possesses a stronger magic. Meanwhile, the protagonist's cat chimes in, reminding him to keep quiet, as he is now merely the evil dragon's mount, bound to serve. In that moment, Jimmy comes to a startling realization. He had completely missed his intended target. He realizes that the cat was struck instead of the knight, yet he attempts to cast the spell once more. However, the outcome remains unchanged. Frustrated, Jimmy finds himself completely overlooked, and irritation begins to bubble within him. As he grapples with the unfolding situation, Shelley suddenly appears behind him, startling him. He recalls that she was meant to be ensnared by his magic and wonders why she's holding a brick. "Step aside, princess," Shelley commands, her voice steady. Confusion washes over him as he realizes she's under a hypnotic trance. Why is she calling him princess? Then it dawns on him the story he had shared. With a sinking feeling, he understands that he is now the last one standing, and in this twisted narrative, he has become the princess. "Step aside, princess," Shelley declares, her voice steady. The fearless hero will confront the dragon. Meanwhile, Gray is locked in battle with the beast when Shelley suddenly approaches him, wielding a brick. With a swift swing, she strikes Gray right on the head. Confused, he stares at her, bewildered by the unexpected attack. But it's not Gray who's truly frightened. It's Jimmy, who watches in shock as Shelley effortlessly knocks down both the knight and the cat with just one brick. After that, she fixed Jimmy with a chilling gaze and beckoned him to return to the castle. The intensity of her stare sent a shiver down his spine, prompting him to warn Shelley to stay away. In a panic, he screamed for help, his cries reverberating through the dungeon, echoing throughout the day. Back on the upper floors of the castle, several doctors rush to the medical wing. The princess, her voice laced with urgency, demands an explanation from Gray about why Shelley has fallen into a deep coma after visiting the dungeon with him and little Timmy. Gray, visibly troubled, replies that it wasn't just Shelley, his cat also collapsed, and they are at a loss to understand why. The princess reflects on the earlier conversation, believing they had simply gone there to play. Just then, Abby Roberts arrives with urgent news. The doctor's diagnosis is ready. He reveals that both the cat and Miss Shelley have been infected by dark magic, requiring the intervention of a priest from the church for treatment. Irene ponders the situation, questioning, if Jimmy is responsible, then why hasn't Gray been affected? As she struggles to find an answer, a bat swoops in, clutching a vial. Upon reaching its destination, it transforms into a female figure and presents herself to her master, Jones, declaring that she has brought the food. However, Master Jones is far from pleased. In a surprising twist, we discover that Jimmy is actually Master Jones. Tears streaming down his face, he tells the vampire that she always carries a terrible smell. Dora expresses her concern, stating that her master has been crying since yesterday. She demands to know who hurt him, ready to take matters into her own hands. However, Jones quickly intervenes, cautioning her against acting rashly if anyone discovers what happened. They could all be in serious trouble. Jimmy chimes in, revealing that a human girl had threatened him with a brick before hugging him in public. Embarrassed by the encounter, he confesses that he's feeling ashamed and is plotting his revenge. Dora continues to laugh at him, fueling Jimmy's irritation. Frustrated, he blames both Dora and Felder, insisting that if he hadn't asked for help, he wouldn't be in this predicament. Now, the suspicions surrounding him are only bound to escalate. Sensing his distress, Dora interjects, suggesting that complicating matters further isn't necessary. After all, she points out, as long as he gives the orders, it doesn't matter whether it's Gregory or even the princess who carries them out. Dora had a penchant for violence, ready to take a life at a moment's notice, even without provocation. But Jimmy found that deeply troubling. He insisted that they couldn't just kill on a whim. It violated the pact they had made with the divine spirits. He reminded her that their actions were rarely subtle and the angels were always vigilant. If a vampire were to take a life, an angel would surely come to exact retribution. The scene shifts to Catherine, where her teacher is attempting to soothe her. "You're a mature angel," he reminds her gently. "You shouldn't be talking about vampires, let alone wielding your sword in such impulsive ways." Catherine replies defensively, "I'm just cleaning my sword. I have no intention of using it." Her master, however, knows her too well. He senses the underlying tension in her words, which is why he continues to try to defuse the situation. Back with the vampires, Dora expresses her understanding of her master's words, but points out that their current stalemate puts them at a disadvantage. She asks what course of action she should take. In response, Jimmy reveals that he has already devised a plan to defeat the Silver Knight. He instructs Dora to send a message to the king, requesting the deployment of the shadow troops. Afterward, Jimmy takes a sip of blood, only to grimace at the taste. It reminds him of wine, and he mutters in distaste that he can't stand alcohol. Dora explains that the blood was sourced from a drunk, ensuring it wouldn't raise any suspicions. She mentions that even vampires in the north have resorted to using pig's blood. Jimmy, however, bristles at the thought. As a pure-blood vampire, he finds the idea repulsive. With determination in his voice, he declares his mission to revive the great race of true blood, insisting that he is the hope of all vampires. Dora beams with joy at her master's words. However, the next morning, Jimmy is jolted awake, startled to find Gray staring at him. "What are you doing in my room?" he asks, confusion etched on his face. Gray replies calmly, "I was ordered to play with you. The princess instructed me to take care of you." Irene expressed her concerns about the last game they played, deeming it too dangerous. This time, she insisted they choose something lighter. In response, Gray offered to stay with Jimmy while his father was away, and suggested they take a walk outdoors to enjoy the sunlight. However, judging by Jimmy's reaction, it seems the path to reviving the pure-blood race is still a long and arduous journey ahead. After that, the protagonist decides to go horse riding around the city. However, his choice draws a considerable amount of attention, not to himself, but to the young man in armor he carries with him on the horse. As they ride through the streets, some passers-by greet the armored youth and even invite him for tea. Yet, Gray remains focused on his goal, simply wanting to take the young man for a ride. Jimmy was far from pleased with the solution they had devised to allow him to walk in the sun. He couldn't help but wonder how a pure-blood vampire like himself could end up in such a predicament. Earlier, the protagonist had apologized, unaware of Jimmy's deep-seated fear of sunlight. "I need you to close the curtains," Jimmy insisted, his voice tinged with urgency. "If you leave them open, something bad could happen." Gray, ever the pragmatist, countered, "As a knight's son, you can't just hide in your room all day. You need to step outside and confront that fear." The boy, however, disagreed and attempted to kick the knight out of his room. Gray calmly responded that he couldn't do that, as the princess had specifically requested he look after Jimmy all day. Determined to make the day enjoyable for the boy, Gray smiled. Curious, Jimmy asked, "Do you always do what you're told? You shouldn't just obey anyone." Frustrated by the constant defiance around him, the protagonist slammed his fist into the wall, creating a chaotic mess. In a fit of anger, he declared that Princess Irene had even instructed him to discipline any child who refused to listen. The little vampire, having witnessed the protagonist's formidable strength firsthand, realized it would be unwise to resist. Reluctantly, he donned his armor and stepped out into the glaring sun, knowing he had no choice but to comply. Back in the present, as Gray strolls through the streets, he spots the same children from earlier. He approaches the mischievous boys, offering a stern warning against lingering in alleys, cautioning them about the trouble that could await. The boy, who had lured him into the trap, suddenly bursts into tears at the sight of Gray, seizing the moment to apologize for his actions. Gray was taken aback by the revelation. The boy, along with his companions, expressed deep regret for their actions. He explained that they were all orphans taken in by the church. But when war broke out in the city, the church's funds dwindled, leaving them with no options. They had resorted to that desperate job out of necessity. In a show of respect for the knight, they humbly sought forgiveness for their choices. The boy declares that, in the end, it was the Silver Knight who truly came to their aid. Inspired by this, he promises that when they grow up, he and his friends will become great knights, just like the Silver Moon Knight. Noticing their unwavering determination, Gray asks if they are truly serious about their ambitions. They respond with fervent enthusiasm, affirming their desire to become knights. With that in mind, Gray declares that there's no need to wait until they're adults. They can begin their journey right now. In fact, they could even start forming a knight order. The protagonist eagerly agrees, saying he will accompany them to the church to pay their commissions as knights. Just then, they notice a figure in armor riding a horse. Gray casually mentions that it's just a boy he adopted that morning. His name is Jimmy. Shortly after, they arrive at the church, where the priest inquires about the purpose of their visit. Gray confidently states that he wishes to transform these children into junior knights and requests the priest to serve as a witness. The priest, however, suspects it might be a joke. He allows Gray to enter, but informs him that he must wait, as someone is currently praying. As Gray steps inside, he realizes this is his first time in a church, and he reflects that it's also the first time he's witnessed someone in prayer. However, he soon finds himself recognized when Catherine introduces herself, expressing her pleasure at finally meeting the Silver Moon Knight. A sense of unease washes over Gray. Inside the church, the protagonist begins to recite the values of the knights, prompting the boys to echo their oaths. They vow to uphold their commitments with sincerity and honor. The boys vow their unwavering loyalty to Gray, declaring that all his enemies will be their enemies, and anyone who dares to challenge them will face the same fate. In response, Gray, embodying the honor of a knight, accepts their pledge with solemnity. He bestows upon them the sacred title, promising that as long as they uphold their vows, he will protect them with his very life. Inside the church, the children cheer, declaring that from this day forward, they are knights. Gray, however, urges them not to get too carried away, reminding them that they are still novices. He promises to bring them armor and horses, marking the beginning of their training. Additionally, he encourages them to come up with a name for their order. Noticing the boys' enthusiasm, Gray adds with a grin that from now on, they should refer to him as Captain. The protagonist reflects on the path he has chosen, yet he firmly resolves that he will never regret becoming a knight. Ever since he was officially appointed, his life has been nothing short of remarkable. Meanwhile, Catherine contemplates his journey, recognizing that even if he is trying to conceal his true feelings, there's an undeniable purity in his choice. It's a sentiment that feels almost angelic. After that, Gray wonders if Catherine has come to kill him. However, the angel reassures him that she has no such intentions, as he hasn't broken any laws or taken a life. Instead, she expresses her curiosity about him and suggests they have a conversation. Intrigued, Gray asks what she wants to discuss. Catherine then poses a question that catches him off guard. What drives his desire to become a knight? Gray expresses his awe at being a knight, captivated by the legends and the respect that surrounds them. It's truly admirable, he says, and there's nothing quite like it. In response, Catherine raises an eyebrow. Shouldn't you feel a bit ashamed of being a good-hearted lich? She questions. She then reminds him that the path of a knight is fraught with challenges. After highlighting several harsh realities of the knight's life, she asks, "So, do you still want to pursue this path?" The protagonist sees no harm in being a knight. After all, he believes Irene is a remarkable woman, one who never questions his choices. He even suggests that Catherine should meet her. As he makes his way to his horse, the priest calls out to him, visibly relieved that he hasn't left yet. The priest wants to discuss something important. Before the protagonist departs, the priest expresses his gratitude, saying that the protagonist has been a tremendous help with the children. The children have developed a newfound interest in reading the Holy Scriptures, and the priest's admiration for the protagonist rivals even his reverence for the Holy Spirit. He believes that a knight like Gray deserves recognition from the divine order, with hope in his heart. Gray asks the priest if he would assist him in entering the divine order of the cross. The priest, however, delivers disappointing news. The rest of the church has unfortunately left the city. As preparations for war began in the White City, the priest was left behind to care for the children. Overwhelmed, he admitted he couldn't manage everything alone and turned to the protagonist for assistance in raising funds for the church. A knight shouldn't leave children helpless, he implored. Without hesitation, Gray replied, "I'll take care of it right away," and dashed off to the nearest tavern. The scene shifts to Jimmy, who has returned from his walk looking utterly exhausted. Dora, noticing his pale complexion, approaches him with concern. "Are you okay?" she asks, her brow furrowing with worry. Jimmy takes a deep breath and recounts his day, detailing the harrowing experiences he endured alongside the knight. Each moment felt like an ordeal, and he can't help but emphasize just how dreadful it all was. Yet, as always, Dora finds humor in his misadventures, a light-hearted chuckle escaping her lips. To her, the trials he faced were nothing short of amusing, and she can't help but revel in the absurdity of it all. Jimmy has a knack for turning even the simplest events into grand dramas. However, as he sees Dora laughing at his misfortune, tears begin to well up in his eyes. Sensing his distress, Dora wraps her arms around him in a comforting hug, urging him not to be sad. She then suggests that if the master is truly incapacitated, she could request the king to send reinforcements. But Jimmy shakes his head, resolute. "I won't seize a throne by force," he replies firmly. Instead, he chooses to bide his time for the resurrection of the pure-blood race. He declares that today's storm has only fueled his ambitions for conquest, and now nothing can stand in the way of his rise to true monarch. After spending some time in the tavern, the protagonist approaches a gambling table and swiftly dominates his opponents, raking in a substantial amount of money for the church. Before heading to the priest, a drunken man stumbles into the protagonist's path on the street. Slurring his words, he accuses Gray of causing him to lose his entire salary and demands at least a few coins in return. Gray raises an eyebrow and asks how much he needs. The drunk replies, "At least 100 silver coins." To the man's surprise, Gray nods in agreement, leaving him utterly bewildered. Afterward, the protagonist advises the man not to misplace the coins again, but explains he can't give him the rest as he needs to take it to the church. Observing the knight's kindness, a group of boys decides to take advantage of the situation and approaches him, claiming they too are in need of money. As Gray continues on his way, he listens to their sorrowful tales, and with each person who approaches, he generously donates a little more from his own pocket. This realization dawns on him. It's not just the pastor in need of funds, but many others as well. Determined, he resolves to gather even more money next time. Ultimately, Gray finds himself with just 2 silver coins, but he knows he must donate them to the church. Upon his arrival, the boy excitedly announces that they have already chosen a name for their order. It will be the Super Invincible Order of the Silver Moon, and they even spent the entire night crafting a banner to celebrate their newfound mission. Gray exclaims that it's amazing and expresses his eagerness to begin their training immediately, aiming to transform them into knights and future defenders of the city. The boy then inquires if Gray's adopted son will be joining them today. The protagonist realizes he completely forgot and quickly decides to fetch little Jimmy. Meanwhile, Jimmy is lying in bed when Dora approaches him. She asks what the problem is this time. Jimmy sighs, recounting his week. "On Monday, I was dragged out into the sun and forced to learn how to ride a horse. Then on Tuesday, I had to endure fencing under that same blazing sun. Honestly, the horse was worse than I was. After that, I had to study bedtime stories, learn to dance, and even do some cleaning, and I blame it all on Gray." Dora feels a strong urge to laugh, but manages to stifle it. Jimmy, his voice tinged with urgency, declares he can't wait any longer. If he does nothing, he'll be tortured to death. He urges Dora to speak with the king and take action without delay. Dora hesitates, recalling how Jimmy had once advised her against hasty decisions. But her master insists that the circumstances have shifted dramatically, leaving them no choice but to act swiftly. Dora nods in understanding, promising to handle the situation. Like a bat, she swiftly takes flight toward the king. A short while later, a soldier from Arene arrives with an urgent report. He reveals that King Bayard VI has dispatched letters to all his subjects, prompting the lords who received them to gather their troops and march toward the capital of Lyon. The princess realizes the gravity of the situation. The king is resolute in his decision to go to war, as he is forming a defensive line. However, this did not bring the peace of mind Jimmy had hoped for. Instead, Gray thrust him back into training, filling Jimmy with a sense of impending doom. Just then, Dora spoke up, offering to speak with the king once more. Moments later, a messenger arrived with urgent news. The king was mobilizing his army, heading straight for the capital, and the designated meeting point was at the Duchess of Becker's border. Despite his expectations, Jimmy finds himself treated in a way that is completely contrary to what he had hoped. Soon, news about the king reaches them once more, revealing that he has dispatched troops to the swamps during the rainy season. In response, the princess convenes a meeting with the counts to gather their opinions on the matter. Felder, ever the skeptic, suggests that the king may simply be confused, which could account for his seemingly irrational decisions. As the king marches alongside his troops, determination fuels their advance. Suddenly, he is confronted by Dora, who insists he push forward with greater urgency. The king replies, "I'm already at full speed. If we reach the White City in this state, we'll be too exhausted to fight." Dora's gaze sharpens as she questions him. "Do you truly desire immortality?" The king grasps her meaning and assures her that he will find a way to expedite their journey. With that, Dora returns to her master. Meanwhile, on the eve of battle, Princess Irene readies herself for the impending fight. Abby Roberts informs her that the warriors have been summoned, and Irene replies with determination that she will join them shortly. Without hesitation, she ascends to the castle's highest tower, determined to address the gathered army below. Irene stands before them, her voice steady and resolute. "The heartless king plans to invade our lands using treacherous tactics," she declares, rallying her troops with a sense of urgency. As the day of battle draws near, she urges everyone to place their faith in their swords, for it is only through their strength that they can safeguard their homes and uphold the glory that is always radiated from the House of Becker. Horace glances to the side and notices a group of children in armor among the warriors, intently listening to the speech. Curiosity piqued, he asks, "Why are there children in the battalion?" Mike, one of Horace's soldiers, approaches him with urgent news. These children were enlisted by the Silver Moon Knight. One of the boys nods in affirmation, proudly declaring that they are members of the super invincible Order of the Silver Moon. Horace's shock is palpable. As soon as the boy finishes speaking, he quickly calls for the leader of this order to meet with the princess. The boys exchange puzzled glances, their confusion palpable. Even Irene looks taken aback as she questions Gray. "Did you really recruit these children into your order?" "Yes," Gray replies, his voice steady. "These boys have potential." Horace raises an eyebrow, skepticism etched on his face. "Are you really planning to take them into battle without their parents' consent?" Before Gray can respond, one of the boys speaks up, his voice small yet clear. "We're orphans. The priest who took us in agrees with this." The princess is taken aback by the news, but the boy firmly declares their unwavering commitment to becoming knights, vowing to give it their all. Irene smiles, pleased by their determination, but requests a moment alone with their leader. The boys nod and assure Gray they'll see him on the battlefield. Without hesitation, the princess instructs Gray to escort the children back to the church, promising to send someone to look after them. Confused, the protagonist protests, reminding her that the children are part of his order. The princess replies thoughtfully, acknowledging that these children may one day become great knights. However, it is precisely because of their potential that she cannot allow them to engage in this war. If they were to be harmed, their bright futures would be lost. Gray confidently assures everyone that they won't get hurt as long as their leader is by their side. Irene, skeptical, questions whether Gray truly understands what war entails, or if he has ever set foot on a battlefield. The protagonist responds affirmatively, declaring that the battlefield is where knights earn their merit, a place consumed by intense fervor. It is the meeting point of life and death, where swords clash and shadows intertwine, a realm where knights, forged in the fires of poverty, carve out their destinies. A sacred ground where all knights seeking merit and glory strive to make their mark. At least, that's what the protagonist once believed. After being reprimanded by the princess, he retreated to the stables, seeking solace in the quiet after Irene expressed her disappointment and urged him to find a place to reflect on his actions. As the cat remained peacefully asleep, Tonitos yearned for some company. He noticed that Gray had deeply upset the princess and felt compelled to understand what had transpired. The protagonist sighed, admitting that he hadn't done anything pleasant and preferred not to dwell on it. In that moment, Irene questioned him, asking if merit and fame were truly all he cared about. She made it clear that if he wished to pursue a career or seek glory, she wouldn't stand in his way. However, she urged him not to involve the children in his ambitions. On the battlefield, bloodshed is inevitable, and victories are often built upon piles of corpses. The very reason for fighting is to secure a future for the children, ensuring they are not robbed of their chance at life. Yet, despite this harsh reality, Gray attempted to argue his point. He insisted that, although they were children, they held immense potential, and he vowed that he could protect them amidst the chaos of war. The princess inquired how he planned to achieve such a feat. She acknowledged his prowess, noting that he could take on 100 men, but in war, he would face over 10,000 enemy soldiers. In the blink of an eye, he could easily lose any of those young warriors who might be trampled or suffer even worse fates. In that scenario, Gray wouldn't just become vulnerable, he would also bear the weight of their blood on his hands. Despite everything, the protagonist insisted that death was not something to dread. He claimed there was no need to fear it, as he possessed the ability to bring people back to life. Irene, taken aback, demanded a clearer explanation of his words. In that moment, she dismissed him and instructed Gray to reflect on his actions. Now, Tonitos finally understands the source of her anger. The horse turns to Gray and asks if he understands the meaning of being alive. Gray admits he does not. Noticing the protagonist's confusion, Tonitos takes a moment to explain the concept of life, particularly from a human perspective. However, since Gray is undead, he struggles to grasp the full depth of it. With a thoughtful nod, Tonitos suggests that Gray visit a tavern and use magic to savor some food and opportunity to experience a taste of life, however fleeting it may be. Gray praises Tonitos as a genius, thrilled by the idea. He declares that from this day forward, he wants to truly experience what it means to be alive. Tonitos nods, explaining that this journey is the first step toward becoming a great knight. As they approach the tavern Gray often frequents, he spots the same drunkard from before. The man's wife pleads with him, desperation in her voice, urging him not to return to gambling. She reminds him that their family's entire livelihood hangs in the balance. She pleads with her husband, explaining that he's drowning in debt and begging him not to gamble again. But he dismisses her concerns, insisting she doesn't see things as he does. He promises to resolve the situation, but when she tries to stop him, he threatens to hit her. Just then, Gray steps in, confronting the drunken man and warning him not to lay a hand on his wife. The drunk recognizes Gray and immediately shifts the blame onto him. He accuses Gray of ruining his life, claiming that the money Gray once gave him led to his gambling addiction and subsequent downfall. He insists that any consequences he faces due to his debts are the knight's fault. In response, Gray offers to give him money to settle his debts, but only if he promises not to harm his wife. However, the wife herself interjects, urging Gray not to go through with it. She insists that her husband lost his fingers the last time he gambled and fears something even worse will happen this time. The man snaps at her to be quiet, asserting that she knows nothing, and turns to the knight, demanding the money. Gray interjects, explaining that he only has 2 silver coins left and didn't have time to visit the church, but offers them to the man anyway. The drunkard, however, is far from satisfied with the amount offered. Gray insists that this is all the money he has, but the man scoffs, claiming that everyone in the city knows Gray is a baron. A noble like him should surely carry more wealth. He bitterly adds that his fingers were severed because of Gray, accusing the knight of lacking honor and integrity. The man's wife desperately attempts to hold him back, but her efforts only fuel his rage. Amidst the chaos, the protagonist finds himself questioning his own actions, realizing that this isn't how the story was supposed to unfold. This was never written in the books. Back at the princess's headquarters, as preparations for war intensify, a messenger bursts in with urgent news. King Baird VI's army has departed from the Great Snowy Mountains and is now advancing toward the Duchy of Becker. The princess declares that the day has finally arrived. She begins to outline the current situation. The king is now beyond the Great River, west of the White City. After a grueling half-month of forced marches, he commands an impressive 40,000 troops, while she leads only 20,000. However, there's a looming threat. He may mobilize additional forces, potentially swelling his ranks to a staggering 100,000. The disparity in strength between them is staggering. If they allow the king to cross the Great River to the west, their chances of defense will vanish. Yet, Gregory insists that waging war isn't solely about numbers. He believes they still have a fighting chance, even with a smaller army. He emphasizes that to secure victory in battle, 3 crucial elements must align: timing, location, and manpower. The king has been marching for 15 days. His soldiers are weary, and with the rainy season upon them, a delay of just 2 more days could spell disaster. The Western River, swollen from the rains, would only add to their suffering. Gregory knows they cannot afford to let the enemy gain any ground. After he shares his thoughts, the princess gazes at him with renewed admiration, remarking that nothing seems to intimidate him. She adds that before the alarm rang out, she dispatched troops to secure the high ground on both sides of the Western River. Now, all that remains is to destroy the boats before the king can regroup. Irene declares that this is the perfect moment to strike and capture the king, ensuring victory in the battle. With a determined glint in her eye, she insists that none of the counts will sleep tonight. She wants their presence on the battlefield. Felder nods in agreement, emphasizing the importance of their unity. With that, they all make their way to the battlefield. As they march, Robert mentions that since the alarm sounded, Gray hasn't shown up at the barracks. He suggests sending someone to find him. Irene responds thoughtfully, saying that Gray has his own matters to consider. If he chooses to, he will join them on the battlefield when he's ready. Abby Roberts relays that Shelley has awakened and requested a private audience with the princess. She revealed that a child named Jimmy possesses knowledge of dark magic capable of manipulating hearts, and he may not even be human. If this is true, the conflict at hand transcends a mere war between humans. The scene shifts to the tavern, where the atmosphere is far from welcoming. The alarm blares, echoing through the air, and everyone wonders why Gray is still here instead of on the battlefield. Lost in thought, Gray feels a wave of sadness wash over him until something suddenly strikes his helmet. Startled, he looks up to find his cat finally awake. The feline saunters over, stretching lazily. "I just took a nap," he says nonchalantly, "and when I woke up it seems a war had broken out." The cat advises Gray to forget about the drunken madman, explaining that giving him money only exacerbates the situation. Gray, however, insists he only wanted to honor his vows and help those in need, struggling to comprehend how things went so wrong. The cat shakes his head, pondering how naive Gray is, almost childlike in his innocence. With a sigh, he adds that the human world is far more complicated than it seems, but he's willing to teach Gray a few essential lessons. He hesitates, knowing that if he intervenes, he could jeopardize her livelihood. The cat then reveals a musician who was humiliated by a group of troublemakers. However, if he receives help, he may never return to the tavern again. The cat turns to Gray and asks if he truly wants that. Gray shakes his head, admitting he doesn't know what to do. The cat sighs, confessing that he doesn't have the answers either, as he wasn't a good person in life. "That's why there are so few good knights in the world," he adds, a hint of bitterness in his voice. He also remarks that many view a knight's oath as nothing more than empty promises, and that Gray might be the only one who truly honors it. From her vantage point above, Catherine observes Gray and worries that if he ever fails to earn the respect of others, even the princess begins to doubt her choice being a knight will not bring him happiness. Instead, it will only lead to confusion and misery. As the war looms on the horizon, the angel ponders the choice the little Lich will make. Moments later, soldiers on the battlefield hear the distant sound of hooves approaching. They turn to see the Silver Moon Knight galloping toward them, urgency in his voice as he demands to know where Irene is, insisting he has something crucial to share with her. One soldier reports that she is on the hill by the riverbank. Without a moment's hesitation, the knight rides toward her, leaving the soldiers bewildered by his sudden appearance. It's the first time they've seen the Silver Moon Knight on a horse that isn't Tonido's. Shortly after, another soldier announces the knight's arrival. Meanwhile, Irene remains upset, convinced he's only here to seize another opportunity to enhance his reputation. Despite her reservations, she agrees to meet him and inquires about his report. The knight, however, remains silent. Sensing the tension, Irene suggests that if he has nothing to say, he might as well warm up his muscles after crossing the river. But the knight reveals his true intentions. He is not there to converse. He has come to take Irene's life. The princess is taken aback by this turn of events. The knight seizes her as a hostage, declaring that to secure her freedom, her soldiers must set fire to all the boats. Without a means to cross the river, they will be forced to fight defensively. Filled with anger and regret, Irene comes to a painful realization. She has made a grave mistake. With a hint of sarcasm, the knight remarks that the princess hardly seems thrilled about her predicament. He adds that it was a grave mistake to keep someone in the army whose identity was a mystery, especially someone capable of getting so close. Just then, Abby Roberts strides in, declaring that the boats have already been burned. He demands the enemy release the princess. The enemy responds coolly, stating he will comply, for if she were to die, the war would come to an end, and that is certainly not what His Majesty desires. He releases the princess and leaps off the cliff. Roberts commands his soldiers to ensure he doesn't escape. Turning to the princess, he vows to protect her at all costs. Irene reassures him that her wounds are only superficial and that she will be fine, but insists he must find the real Gray. Meanwhile, the protagonist has just stepped out of the tavern. He apologizes to Tonidos, explaining that he tried to help him understand living beings, but it only left him more confused. Gray then asks what living beings do when they feel confused. The cat replies that they usually sleep. Gray points out that leeches don't sleep and admits he doesn't even know how to do it. The cat suggests that he needs to figure it out. Suddenly, a group of soldiers appears, spotting Gray as he wanders the streets, mistaking him for the enemy. They demand retribution, convinced he was the one who attacked the princess. Gray protests, insisting it's a misunderstanding and that he would never harm Irene. But the soldiers cut him off, telling him to save his explanations for later they're taking him to prison. Gray's imprisonment was swift. He found himself locked in a cell when suddenly a cat appeared, revealing the truth behind his arrest. The feline explained that someone had impersonated Gray, attacking the princess and compelling his men to set fire to the ships, igniting chaos among the populace. Anger surged within Gray as he listened to the cat's words. He knew he had to escape immediately to rectify the situation. Just then, Irene arrives, asserting that Gray doesn't need to justify himself. She turns to him, insisting he explain everything right now. Relieved to see her safe, Gray declares that he is the real Gray, not an imposter. The princess raises an eyebrow, asking if he has any way to prove it. Without missing a beat, Gray suggests a dance. The cat calls Gray an idiot, insisting that what they really want is for him to remove his helmet. However, Gray confidently replies that it's unnecessary. He knows the princess recognized him. To his surprise, Irene then opens the cell door. Gray immediately asks where the imposter is, eager to catch him and make him pay for his misdeeds. But Irene calmly assures him there's no need for that. She informs Gray that Shelley has woken up but requires care. The princess instructs him to remain at the castle to look after her, as well as to keep an eye on Felder and little Jimmy, who are currently under house arrest and need supervision. Gray had envisioned himself in battle, but the princess assures him that his presence will be invaluable if he follows her instructions. After all, the truth about the imposter is known, yet no one can identify who truly wore the armor. He and the townspeople are aware of the situation, but since he never removes his helmet, they cannot recognize the true Gray. Fear has gripped everyone, and for his own safety, Irene insists he should remain at the castle. Gray attempts to argue, stating that a true knight never allows his leader to face the battlefield alone. Fuming, Irene declares that she has no use for his knightly vows. They won't help her win the battle, and chivalry without victory is meaningless. With determination, she commands him to remain at the castle until the conflict is past. Reluctantly, Gray concedes, agreeing to stay out of it. As Gray returns to the castle, he is met with a sight of guards engaged in fierce combat. Lost in thought, he is suddenly startled by the appearance of Shelley, who he hasn't seen in quite some time. "I heard a summary of the recent events," she says, her brow furrowed with concern. "But I still don't understand why Irene left her greatest knight out of the battle." Gray expresses his frustration, revealing that the princess doubts his ability to secure victory. Despite his efforts to uphold his vows, her trust in him has wavered. He confides that everyone he has tried to help has suffered, and his intentions often lead to unexpected outcomes. Upset by Irene's assertion that chivalry is meaningless without victory, he struggles to comprehend her perspective. Shelley reflects on how much has transpired during her absence, but she expresses her gratitude for Gray, who has supported her and her family through it all. Gray beams at her acknowledgement, feeling a renewed sense of purpose. He then asks if Shelley might assist him with a few more questions he has. Shelley admits she's not well versed in philosophy, but she suggests that if he has a dilemma weighing on his heart, he should visit the church. After all, the priest is a professional when it comes to answering questions and solving problems. Just then, outside, someone hurls a hook tied to a rope. Unfortunately, it misses the top of the tower, leaving the would-be climber empty-handed. One of the guards suddenly pauses, his ears perked up. "Did you hear that?" he asks his companion. The friend shakes his head, but a flicker of concern crosses his face. "No, but we should patrol again. It's a critical moment, after all." The figure who threw the rope is revealed to be the church's priest. Lacking any experience, he misses his target and begins to regret not retreating with the others when he was warned. Just then, Gray appears, startling him. The protagonist questions the priest's intentions, asking why he is trying to lead the city. In response, the priest turns the question back on him, asking why the Silver Moon Knight is pursuing him. Gray admits he's feeling a bit confused and seeks some guidance. Frustrated by his failed escape attempt, the priest resolves to return to the church. Meanwhile, on the battlefield, a messenger arrives with urgent news. The king's forces have begun crossing the river, just 10 kilometers from the camp. Despite the loss of many ships, they successfully evaded enemy patrols. They are now tasked with bringing knights and supplies ashore using local militias. Irene comes to a stark realization. The king has no intention of retreating. Determined, she declares that they cannot allow him to land. Just then, another messenger arrives, breathless, reporting that he spotted the king's army in the north. To make matters worse, Felder's men, along with Casper's, have gathered around the king. Confused, the princess points out that Felder is under house arrest. "How is that even possible?" she asks, her voice laced with disbelief. She instructed Gray to keep a watchful eye on him and little Jimmy. Then, she inquired about their means of communication and how they were coordinating troop movements. Count Gregory advised Irene to retreat to the White City for the time being, suggesting it would be easier to defend since the enemy was gathering strength. However, the princess countered that the White City was isolated, and retreating now would only corner them further, causing the people to suffer. Resolute, she told Gregory to remain with the troops. Determined to change the course of fate, she sets her sights on the northeast, hoping to intercept the king before he can land. If she can capture Paradise, her chances of victory will remain alive. Meanwhile, the protagonist finds himself in a moment of uncertainty. He seeks counsel from the priest, yearning for guidance on how to become a better knight. Conflicted and lost, he grapples with his oath to protect the princess, even as she has commanded him to stay out of the battle. This dilemma clashes with Gray's knightly oath, leaving him torn between obeying his princess and adhering to his vow. The priest observes that Gray is striving to embody the ideals of a knight, eager for the world to recognize him as one. However, therein lies the challenge. It's impossible to please everyone. He reassures Gray that confusion is a natural part of this journey, but it stems from a deeper issue. Gray has yet to uncover the true essence of knighthood, which the priest refers to as the heart of a knight. Gray doesn't fully grasp the meaning behind those words, but the priest explains that the heart is what truly matters. While people often speak in absolutes, labeling things as black or white, the reality is much more nuanced, existing in shades of gray. Answering such profound questions can be challenging, yet the solution is surprisingly straightforward. Simply follow and obey the commands of your heart. The priest explains that when someone offers advice, it ultimately falls upon the individual to make their own judgments. He emphasizes that even if one doesn't always choose the right path, clarity will eventually emerge. Not everyone may appreciate help, but there will always be those who express gratitude. In essence, the priest advises him not to view others' words as absolute law, but rather as guidance, encouraging him to trust his own intuition. He explains that faith is a light capable of illuminating the darkness and revealing the right path. When someone passionately believes in chivalry and follows their heart, the concepts of right and wrong transform into actions that embody the true essence of chivalry. In the end, the priest is left uncertain whether the knight truly understood his message. Judging by Gray's expression, he appears even more bewildered than when he first entered the church. The priest is acutely aware that the city could be under siege at any moment. If he doesn't leave now, it could spell his doom. Yet, hearing her words brings him a sense of relief. He turns to Shelley, asking if she could assist him with other questions. She hesitates, admitting that philosophy isn't her strong suit. However, she offers a glimmer of hope, suggesting that if he harbors a dilemma in his heart, he can always visit the church for guidance. The priest, a seasoned expert in addressing inquiries, prompts Gray to share his question. Gray poses a thought-provoking dilemma. If a person dies and returns as an undead, yet retains the ability to sing, dance, and pursue their desires, what distinguishes them from the living? The priest acknowledges the depth of Gray's question, noting that it ventures into even more philosophical territory than those before it. However, before providing an answer, he wishes to pose a rhetorical question of his own. He poses a question. If someone is evil and has stolen many times, does that make them good or bad? Gray responds that such a person would be a villain. However, the priest counters, suggesting that if this thief only targets the wealthy, particularly the cruel ones, and shares the spoils with the poor, then perhaps he could be seen as a good person. Intrigued, the protagonist agrees, stating that in that scenario, the thief would indeed be a good man. The priest then adds, it's the same with the dead and the living. What truly matters is the heart of each individual. Origins and methods hold little weight as long as the intentions are pure. In the grand scheme, the living and the dead are not so different. The protagonist nods in understanding, but then shifts the conversation. He asks the priest if he was attempting to flee the city. The sudden change in topic catches the priest off guard. After a moment, he admits that he is indeed trying to escape, knowing full well that the city is on the brink of attack. He simply doesn't want to witness the devastation that is to come. He declares that he's following his heart, ultimately deciding to flee from danger, convinced that the princess won't survive until dawn. Gray clings to that last statement, realizing he must rush to meet Irene. His vow of loyalty compels him to protect her. The priest then asks if he can join Gray on this urgent mission. When Gray questions whether the priest intends to fight, the priest shakes his head, replying, "No, I just want to avoid climbing those walls again to escape." As Gray steps out of the church, he encounters his apprentices, who eagerly raise their group's flag. One of them chimes in, revealing he overheard everything and knows their leader is setting off to find the princess. Excitement sparks among the group as they express their desire to join him, eager to assist both the princess and the city. However, the priest intervenes, urging them to return to their beds and reconsider their reckless ambitions. Gray reflects on his conversation with the priest, arriving at a stark conclusion. If he falls in battle, he will not return. He admits he can't guarantee the safety of his comrades. Yet, the boy counters with conviction. He reminds Gray that they all risk their lives the moment they pledge their loyalty. They are not children in need of protection. They are knights ready to fight. The protagonist feels a surge of emotion upon hearing their words and nods in agreement. Gathering with his friends, he declares that together, they will support the princess in winning this war. The priest looks at Gray, skeptical, and asks if he truly intends to follow through. With unwavering resolve, Gray replies, yes, taking full responsibility for their mission. As soldiers pass nearby, one of them suddenly spots the Silver Moon Knight. "I found the traitor," he shouts, commanding his comrades to arrest him. Confused, Gray protests, insisting there must be some misunderstanding. But the soldier coldly retorts, "Save your explanations for your brothers who have already died." Before launching an attack, Gray quickly defends himself, retorting that they always strike first and ask questions later. He immediately demands that the soldier explain what prompted them to want him dead once more. Annoyed, the soldier retorts, questioning how Gray could say such a thing when it was Gray himself who had killed the dungeon guards with his own hands and freed Felder and his son from their prison. The protagonist suddenly realizes that the imposter is once again acting in his name, and a surge of fury courses through him. Determined to put an end to the tarnishing of his reputation, he knows he must resolve this issue before approaching the princess, or it could lead to even greater trouble down the line. With a steely resolve, he mutters to himself that, while pretending to be him might be entertaining, it's time for him to unleash his true anger. Meanwhile, during the prison break, the imposter learns that someone is pursuing them. He inquires about the number of pursuers, and the soldier replies that it's just one, none other than the real Silver Moon Knight. Inside the carriage, Jimmy's desperation mounts upon hearing this news. "We have to eliminate the knight immediately," he insists, his voice laced with urgency. "If we don't, he'll never stop coming for us." The leader of the group announces that they have reached the meeting point and instructs everyone to get ready to capture the Silver Moon Knight. Gray, feeling a sense of urgency, wonders why they are hesitating. It isn't until he finally confronts the imposter that everything clicks into place. "At last, I've found you, the one who dares to impersonate me," he declares, his voice steady. "You're the same coward who attempted to assassinate the princess and slaughtered the warriors of White City." He then inquires about the name of this individual. The imposter feels the weight of the protagonist's oppressive aura, realizing just how formidable the Silver Moon Knight truly is. He recalls hearing tales of the Silver Moon Knight's legendary strength, having defeated 50 heavily armed knights single-handedly. With a dramatic flourish, he removes his helmet and tosses it to the ground, declaring that such martial feats are indeed unparalleled in the world. He questions what the knight would do if confronted by 4 times as many heavily armed warriors. The imposter, without revealing his name, claims to be the captain of the first unit of the King's Shadow Guards, known simply as Shadow. With that revelation, the cat declares that the King's Shadow Guards are prepared and inquires about Gray's next move. The protagonist, resolute, replies that he will charge head-on. The cat proclaims that he has evolved from a brainless fool into a determined one. Gray, fueled by his ambition, declares that he simply wants to crush them all and instructs Tinnitus to initiate a surprise attack. Meanwhile, Shadow commands the spearmen to take their positions as the wall of enemy soldiers readies itself for the impending clash. Tinnitus remarks that this formation is unpleasant, something he used to avoid in the past, but now he finds himself indifferent to it. As they draw closer, one of the soldiers attempts to ensnare the Silver Moon Knight with a lasso. However, the effort proves futile as the protagonist's sheer strength sends the soldier flying. Shadow watches the scene unfold and comments that the protagonist resembles a hurricane, unstoppable and fierce. Tinnitus confidently declares that he has identified the imposter. The enemy captain retorts, warning that relying solely on his instincts is a grave error. But as he lunges to attack the protagonist, it is he who ends up on the receiving end of a devastating blow. Captain Shadow crashes to the ground, shaken, admitting that the punch was terrifying even with his high-quality armor. His internal organs felt shattered as he witnessed the true power of the Silver Moon Knight. Defeated, Shadow lamented his failure, expressing a desire for death. Gray, however, stood firm, declaring that he does not kill and only seeks an apology from the enemy for Irene and the warriors of White City. Shadow scoffed, insisting that this is war, and in war, apologies hold no meaning. As soon as the carriage comes to a halt, Jimmy steps out, irritation etched across his face. "I'm tired of this," he declares, his voice dripping with disdain as he labels everyone a bunch of losers. "I've reached the end of my patience, and now everyone is going to die." His gaze locks onto Felder, the first target on his list. "You thought immortality was promised to you, but I show no mercy to you or the rest." Even the imposter feels his life essence being drained away. The protagonist's cat, sensing the danger, becomes frightened and wonders about the source of this overwhelming power. Gray explains that this is dark magic, a force that directly siphons life. Meanwhile, Jimmy observes that the knight appears unfazed. After all, he seems immune to the effects of the magic eye. He reveals that, from the very start, everyone believed the king sought to annex the Duchy of Becker. However, he confesses that he is the true architect of this plan, being a descendant of Dracula, and now he aims to reclaim what is rightfully his. With chilling determination, he declares that he will send both the knight and his lady to the afterlife. In a flashback, we see little Jimmy, bathed in moonlight, engrossed in a book of Dracula tales. His eyes sparkle with fascination as he muses aloud, convinced that his ancestors must have been true members of the vampire lore. Just then, Dora appears, breaking the spell. "How long are you planning to stay out here before coming home?" she asks. Jimmy quickly defends himself, insisting, "I haven't run away from home. He was on the brink of claiming a magnificent castle, just like his ancestors had, with dreams of conquering the world. Dora, curious, pointed out that he already lived in a castle. Jimmy shook his head, insisting he didn't want to dwell in a lonely fortress perched on a cliff. No, he envisioned a grand castle bustling with servants. Intrigued, Dora asked where exactly he planned to find such a castle. Jimmy revealed his ambitious plan to venture into the human world, where he intended to disguise himself as a noble son. His goal? To eliminate the rightful heirs and seize their castle for himself. Now in the present, he fixates on the Duke of Becker, determined to claim everything that rightfully belongs to him. He threatens Gray, declaring that both he and his princess will soon be sent to the afterlife. He taunts Gray, asking if he will still cling to that foolish knight's code. As the tension escalates, the protagonist's cat urges him to hide. Moments later, Jimmy unleashes a devastating attack, resulting in a massive explosion. "That's what you deserve, Gray," he sneers, asserting that this is the fate of anyone who dares to cross him. He laments that no one is there to witness the legendary demise of the great Silver Moon Knight. Meanwhile, the protagonist's cat, having survived the attack, approaches and asks if Gray is all right. Although the knight's armor lies shattered, the inner strength remains intact, allowing Gray to finally emerge from the shadows. Afterward, he surveys the numerous bodies strewn around him. Channeling his magic, he begins to transform them into undead minions. With a smirk, he wonders aloud if there's truly no one around to witness this dark spectacle. Jimmy stares in disbelief, his heart racing as he confronts the Lich before him. "Why is there a Lich here?" he exclaims, shock evident in his voice. Meanwhile, as dawn breaks in the distance, an army stands poised for battle. But on the princess's side, the situation is dire. She struggles to remain upright, her strength waning, and asks weakly, "How many soldiers do we still have left?" Horace reports that the cavalry has been completely wiped out, leaving fewer than 2,000 infantry at the last camp. If they retreat any further, they will be forced to return to the White City. Irene stands at a crossroads, uncertain of her next move, when Count Gregory suddenly appears, inquiring about the whereabouts of the Silver Moon Knight. The princess replies that she ordered Gray to remain at the castle. Gregory argues that Gray possesses immense strategic value and shouldn't have been left out of the battle. However, Irene counters that it's too late for that now. The king's army of 100,000 is advancing, and with their numbers, victory is all but assured. Frustrated, Gregory declares that if the princess has already given up, he sees no reason to remain by her side. He refuses to lead his family to ruin alongside her. He declares that as soon as the king lays waste to the White City, he will choose to surrender. The princess acknowledges their dire situation but refuses to stand in his way. Meanwhile, rumors of war ripple through the city, sapping the people's hope and prompting many to devise escape plans. Even Shelley longs to leave the city, to reunite with her grandfather, but the guards are determined to shield her from the perils that lie beyond the walls. Shelley inquires about Gray's whereabouts, noting that the princess had ordered him to remain at the castle for her protection. If he were with them, they wouldn't need to leave. The soldiers exchange apologetic glances before explaining that the Silver Moon Knight has left the city. They witnessed him departing before dawn, accompanied by a group of children, and since then, they've received no word. With heavy hearts, they conclude that he must have fled. However, Shelley is skeptical of this theory. She insists she knows Gray well enough to affirm that he is not the type to flee from battle. Meanwhile, near the river, a significant movement stirs, startling the local wildlife. The king's army is approaching, and tensions rise as an argument erupts between him and the archbishop, who is visibly distressed by the mounting losses. The king declares that the outcome of the war hinges on the archbishop's testimony, promising that it will lead to a fair victory. He urges the archbishop to relay this message to the Holy Order. With a hopeful heart, the archbishop prays that the resolution of this conflict will be just and honorable. Meanwhile, the princess, weary of her armor, decides she can no longer endure its weight. She resolves to fight on without it, embracing the battle in her own way. Irene reassures herself that her remaining forces are still standing strong. Meanwhile, the king's army, a staggering 100,000 strong, looms ominously, ready to bring everything to an end. Before launching his attack, the king attempts to persuade Irene to surrender, offering her a chance to save the lives of those who remain. He promises that if she renounces her claim to the throne of House Becker, he will grant her forgiveness in the name of the kingdom of Isaac. Irene believes that the darkness of broken oaths, the corruption of faith, and the greed that resides in the heart have cast an eternal shadow over the world. She declares that the king's words hold no meaning for her. In response, the king asserts that his words are, in fact, trustworthy. The princess can't help but chuckle at the irony, recalling the vow the king made years ago to the Becker family, promising that the crown would uphold the rights of their first heir. Yet here he is, doing the exact opposite. The king retorts, asserting that she is not her family's first heir, her brother is. Irene, taken aback, questions, "Do I really have a brother?" Given the king's questionable reputation and his history of poor decisions, she can't help but wonder if his words are merely a deception. Nevertheless, the king insists that she has no choice. He will not break his vow in front of the gathered crowd of tens of thousands. Reluctantly, Irene commands everyone to lower their weapons and adhere to the king's wishes. The soldiers hesitate, confused by the princess's apparent willingness to surrender. Even Horus challenges her, insisting that even if they face defeat, they will fight for her until the very end. Irene responds firmly, stating that such devotion would be reckless. She cannot bear the thought of more lives lost because of her. Yet, despite her resolve, she hasn't given up. She simply wants to spare others from continuing this dangerous path. Horus's irritation flares at the princess's decision, but she swiftly calms him, asserting that this is her final choice. She addresses Horus, Abby Roberts, her loyal squire, and her uncle Gregory along with his family, declaring that this is her last order as princess. With unwavering resolve, she commands everyone to drop their weapons and retreat as far as possible. Despite their reluctance, they find themselves obeying the princess. After all, she remains their leader. Irene declares that they are all free from their obligations to her and her family. In a way, she considers it a blessing that Gray isn't present. With their skills, the survivors will have no trouble finding a new lord. Irene rises to her feet, determination etched on her face, as she declares she will fight until her last breath. Alone, she strides forward to confront the king and his formidable army. The king scoffs, labeling her a foolish girl, yet he concedes that if she wishes to end it this way, he will grant her desire. With a wave of his hand, he commands his soldiers to prepare for battle. Suddenly, he hears a voice drawing near, shouting words that resonate deeply. Humility, integrity, compassion, sacrifice, valor, and justice. Even Irene recognizes this voice, realizing that Gray has arrived, believing there are still those willing to defy the law to honor their vows. Gray, flanked by his army of undead, proclaims that, for the sake of glory and his unwavering conviction, he has pledged his loyalty to the princess and the Becker family. He declares that anyone who dares to oppose her will become his enemy as well. With a fierce determination, he vows to fight for her honor until his last breath. With that, he charges forward, ready to confront the enemy army head-on. From above, Catherine observes everything with a sense of satisfaction. She reflects that when humanity first exchanged their vows, a small light continued to flicker. Tonight, she notes, has finally reached its climax, and she wonders what the fate of this fragile hope will be. Before that, near the city walls, the children hear a commotion from the other side and begin to wonder why Gray is taking so long to return. Yet, they reassure themselves that their leader is strong and capable. Nothing bad could possibly happen to him. Meanwhile, the priest speculates that Gray, having ventured outside the city, has gone off alone to confront the imposter, ensuring the children wouldn't follow him into battle. Suddenly, a group of soldiers emerges from the shadows, prompting the priest to question why knights are lurking in the forest. Noticing their unfamiliar attire, he realizes they are neither city knights nor part of the king's army. Sensing the danger as they find themselves surrounded by these unknown soldiers, the priest steels himself, ready to protect the children at all costs. One of the boys observes that there's no threat and points out that the soldiers are there to protect them. He notes that the crest on their uniforms resembles the emblem of the silver moon, suggesting they must be aligned with the boss. The priest, puzzled, wonders where Gray managed to gather such a large group. Just then, the protagonist steps forward, a confident smile on his face, and announces, "I'm back." He also brought armor and war horses, then turned to the boys and asked if they were ready. The priest, concerned, questioned whether he truly intended to take them to war. Gray affirmed his commitment, reminding them that he had promised to lead them to the battlefield. A knight, he declared, never breaks a vow. Meanwhile, on the battlefield, the king dismissed their resistance with a scoff, wondering what a handful of knights could possibly achieve against his might. He commands his golden-armored knights to launch an assault. From the heights of the white city walls, the soldiers catch sight of the Silver Moon Knight and exclaim that their salvation has arrived, for he is battling the king. Gray declares that no one will leave this place until the king offers an apology to Princess Irene. Meanwhile, the king, undeterred, orders his men to eliminate everyone who dares to challenge him. Catherine observes intently and poses a question to her teacher. Does Professor Abbott really believe that even someone stronger than a human cannot defeat 100,000 men? His magic would surely run out long before he could claim victory. The angel replies, noting that Gray is well aware of his opponent's strength and is doing everything he can to fight back. She adds that Gray is either very young or quite naive, but regardless, his courage is truly commendable. The protagonist's cat scoffs, insisting that Gray should have summoned an army of undead instead of relying on those children, calling him crazy for his decision. Gray, undeterred, claims he received a revelation from the Holy Spirit, asserting that something divine doesn't require an army of undead to engage in this war. The cat, skeptical, retorts that Gray simply chose not to bring the undead because they were too unstable. With a hint of sarcasm, it questions whether Gray truly believes he can triumph against 100,000 soldiers. The protagonist admits he doesn't have all the answers, but he refuses to give up. One of the boys expresses concern, noting that his horse is trotting faster than it did during training, and he's unsure if he can keep up. Gray reassures him, urging him to believe in himself. "We are all Silver Moon Knights now," he says confidently. "The Holy Spirit will bless us." In an instant, even the angel is taken aback as a divine power descends from the heavens, enveloping Gray and his troop in a radiant blessing. This celestial gift not only strengthens them, but also fills them with newfound confidence. One of the boys exclaims that he feels so invigorated that every fiber of his being is responding to the surge of power. Meanwhile, the Archbishop ponders the source of this extraordinary power, concluding that only a true paladin could wield it. Catherine watches Gray, noting that despite knowing he is invincible, he continues to fight with unwavering determination. The strength of Gray's troop is so formidable that it not only intimidates their foes, but also delivers a direct blow to their morale. The enemy troops find themselves exposed, their ranks crumbling under relentless assault. Amid the chaos, the protagonist's cat, trembling with fear, exclaims that Gray's actions will lead to a fiery disaster. Gray, however, dismisses the concern, insisting it's not fire, it's the ascension of the Holy Spirit. Yet, the cat, still anxious, points out that Tendos is also undead, warning Gray that this power could spell doom for them both. Tenedos declares that he will fight with the sacred light, a bold statement that leaves the cat pondering why, amidst all these people, he seems to be the only one with a shred of sanity. Meanwhile, the king watches in disbelief, questioning why a paladin is serving under Irene's command. His thoughts are abruptly interrupted by the raucous cheers from the walls. An old drunkard shouts for Gray to triumph, insisting that he can't die before settling his debts. Shelley joins the chorus of support, urging Gray to unleash his magic and obliterate the enemies. As several spectators scale the walls to cheer for the Silver Moon Knight, the guards find themselves powerless to intervene. Gray and the priest exchange astonished glances, realizing that Gray has tapped into the true sacred magic of the Holy Spirit. Even the remaining soldiers loyal to the princess join in the fervor, exclaiming that this is nothing short of a miracle. Catherine's teacher scoffs, declaring that this isn't a miracle but sheer foolishness, insisting that the Lich will turn to ashes upon contact. The angel interjects, pointing out that this is merely what humans are taught, that only the righteous can wield sacred magic. She continues, explaining that when darkness engulfs the land, heroes bathed in holy light will rise to save the world, empowered by the will of the Holy Spirit. Abbott inquires about Catherine's cryptic words, but she brushes him aside, turning her attention to Gray. With a serene confidence, the angel assures him that she will aid him in the impending battle. Channeling her divine energy, Catherine enhances both Gray and his steed, fortifying them for the fight ahead. But her generosity doesn't stop there. She extends her powers to the entire troop, bolstering their strength as well. With a mix of awe and disbelief, Gray wonders aloud if the Holy Spirit is truly acknowledging him. Catherine shakes her head, but reveals that an angel has given their approval. Suddenly, a brilliant light envelops them, visible from a distance. Even the Archbishop witnesses Gray being blessed by a guardian angel. With this divine miracle at his side, the knight boldly declares that this war is unjust, and he questions whether he is truly on the right side. Meanwhile, the king's fear begins to take hold. He urges his advisors not to remain idle, reminding them that even a paladin is not invincible in the midst of war. The archbishop, sensing the king's growing unease, steps forward to plead with him. He believes the king is being swayed by dark forces and implores him to reconsider the continuation of the conflict. Furious, the king barks at him to be silent, declaring that no one dares to speak to the king in such a manner. In a swift motion, he lunges at the archbishop. Catherine catches Gray's eye, and in that moment, he realizes what he must do. Without hesitation, he charges forward, intervening just in time to shield the archbishop from the king's wrath. The king despises interruptions, but Gray's sole focus is on rescuing the archbishop and ensuring his safety. In a moment of revelation, the archbishop declares to all present that the king has been tainted by darkness. With unwavering conviction, he calls upon the Holy Spirit and summons the entire army to put an end to this unjust war. The king stands before the soldiers, weapons drawn, and his discomfort is palpable. The enemy is over there, he protests, not aimed at me. In response, the archbishop raises his voice, invoking the Holy Spirit to call upon the soldiers to end this unjust war once and for all. Tension hangs in the air as the soldiers find themselves divided. On one side stands the archbishop, the spiritual leader of the church, and on the other, the king, the highest political authority in the land. In his youth, King Harper Bayard of the Kingdom of Isaac was renowned for his bravery. He led a formidable army to victory against the invading forces from the Kingdom of Elan, despite facing overwhelming odds. This legendary battle solidified his fame and earned him the title of hero among his people. Following his triumph, countless young men and women flocked to join his ranks, becoming proud members of the Golden Armor Knights. Determined to uphold his martial example, the archbishop delivers a powerful message. Every hero's legacy must eventually come to an end. He commands that all soldiers lay down their arms and cease the war. Yet, the soldiers stand firm, insisting on their loyalty to the king. Undeterred, the archbishop counters that their oath does not justify the practice of injustice. He urges them to look beyond the battlefield, where they will find the holy light, paladins, and angels awaiting them. That should be more than enough for them to grasp the gravity of the situation. Continuing the war would be nothing short of blasphemy against the Holy Spirit. Meanwhile, the priest declares that if the enemies persist in their fighting, he will join the fray as well. He acknowledges that the knights on the battlefield, clad in holy light, may appear brave, but beneath their armor, they are merely children, no older than 12 or 13. He declares that if even children can defend their homeland and the Holy Spirit, then adults should not cower in fear. The crowd is taken aback by his words, but soon they find themselves rallying behind the priest's message, inspired to join the fight for their city as well. Witnessing the chaos among the people, the soldiers begin to grasp the gravity of their situation. One soldier, overwhelmed by a surge of conscience, approaches the king and asks for forgiveness, declaring that he can no longer fight for him. Despite the oaths they once shared, he cannot continue to wage war against the very essence of the Holy Spirit. After all, their vows pale in comparison to that sacred truth. With those words, the other soldiers dropped their weapons and surrendered. The king, seething with rage, questioned whether mere words from his enemies could truly sway the loyalty of his men. Meanwhile, the leader of the soldiers turned to the Holy Spirit, seeking forgiveness for failing to inform the church about the king's connections to the vampire clan. Upon hearing this revelation, the king erupts in fury, branding the soldier insane. However, moments later, another soldier steps forward, insisting that it is not madness. He claims to have witnessed the king himself interacting with a vampire, a silver-haired girl no less. The soldier swears that if he is lying, he would face death and damnation, along with his family, forever forsaken by the Holy Spirit. If the previous words hadn't been enough to sway the other soldiers, this revelation hit them like a punch to the gut. The king, overwhelmed by despair, realized that his own army had turned against him. No one obeyed his commands anymore. Instead, they regarded him with judgmental eyes. Harper Bayard declared that he was always right, that his words were law. Therefore, nothing on earth should dare to rise against him. Despite his desperate actions, he is ultimately subdued by his own soldiers. Meanwhile, Gray inquires if he has emerged victorious. His cat responds, almost miraculously, that yes, he has won. Now Gray stands as the greatest knight in the entire Kingdom of Isaac, and perhaps even in the whole world. Gray surveys the battlefield, taking in the scene around him. Though he stands under the protection of an angel, he notices that the enemy soldiers regard him with a mix of fear and respect. In their eyes, he is not just a knight, he is a symbol of victory. Even the princess watches him with admiration, her gaze filled with pride for the man who stands resolute amidst the chaos. Gray approaches Irene, his expression filled with regret. "I'm sorry," he says. "I didn't protect you as I should have, and I arrived late to the battlefield." For a moment, Irene is taken aback, her words caught in her throat. Gray's heart races. He had braced himself for her anger, but then, to his surprise, she smiles softly. "You arrived at the perfect time," she replies, her voice steady. "You secured victory for all of us." With that, the entire princess's army erupts in celebration, joined by the jubilant townsfolk. From her vantage point on the wall, Shelley gazes down at the scene, reflecting on the magnificent tale of a resilient princess and her valiant knight, one that has finally reached a perfect conclusion. During the Battle of White City, held in the territory of the Kingdom of Isaac, a knight named Gray emerged for the first time in human history. In a stunning display of valor, he defeated an army of 100,000 heavily armed men, loyal to King Bayard VI, a miracle etched into the annals of military history. Following this monumental clash, King Bayard VI was dethroned and now awaits a verdict from the Pope. Meanwhile, several nobles from the Duchy of Becker who conspired with him have also been apprehended. With the full backing of the Holy Council, Irene Berbera Becker, the sole heir of House Becker, officially inherited her father's title, becoming the Grand Duchess of the Duchy of Becker. Meanwhile, Gray was elevated to the rank of Count, now the second Count in the newly established Duchy of Becker, alongside Count Gregory. In just a few short months, he had risen from commoner to Count through his own merit, and tales of his remarkable deeds spread across the entire continent. He became a shining example for other knights, embodying the ideal that every young aspiring warrior sought to emulate. That same year, Archbishop Anthony I, at the age of 80, attended the Holy Council to present the causes and consequences of the Battle of White City. Shortly thereafter, the council officially recognized Gray as the fifth paladin of the entire continent. The others had been personally trained by the Pope, making Gray an unusual exception. His absence from the summons raised eyebrows. Meanwhile, a fierce struggle for the throne erupted in the Lion's capital, which was reeling from the loss of its king. Bayard VI had 12 children, and the battle for the throne ignited fierce rivalries among them. Despite everything that had transpired, the current state of White City remained largely unaffected. Its formidable reputation deterred any would-be attackers, a testament to the protection offered by the Silver Moon Knight and the newly appointed Grand Duchess, Miss Irene. Yet, since the succession ceremony, she had vanished from public view, leaving many to speculate about her whereabouts. Meanwhile, Count Horace dedicated 5 long days and nights to assessing the war's toll, meticulously tallying damages and compensating the families of the fallen. Meanwhile, Abbey Robert spent 7 days grappling with the stagnation of commerce and the tense diplomatic situation brought on by the war. During this time, Irene dedicated 9 consecutive days to managing the territory's governance in the aftermath of the conflict. Juggling a myriad of responsibilities, amidst this whirlwind of tasks, Horace questioned why she hadn't called upon Gray for assistance. The Duchess replied, "Gray isn't suited for paperwork, and honestly, he does enough by staying out of trouble." Moments later, a messenger arrives with startling news. The Silver Moon Knight has sold the castle he won to Count Gregory and is now tossing gold from the tower of White City's castle. The Duchess is taken aback, her disbelief palpable, and the onlookers are equally astonished by her reaction. Yet Irene remains unfazed. She knows this is just like Gray. Still, she can't help but ask if Gray is still at the castle, eager for a chance to speak with him. Meanwhile, in the Kingdom of Heaven, Catherine walks alongside her teacher, summoned to a meeting convened by the Holy Spirit himself. The divine presence had learned of Catherine's bold decision to confront the LICH amidst the chaos of war. With conviction, Catherine asserts that the choice was hers alone, emphasizing that her teacher, Abbot, had no part in it. She knew she had to act swiftly. The Holy Spirit found the statement intriguing, realizing that the little LICH would eventually face destruction due to his unwavering faith. The angel noted that the LICH's devotion to the Holy Spirit was profound, a rare commitment worthy of admiration. This is precisely why she chose to extend her help. Then, the Holy Spirit turned to Catherine, asking if she was certain of her choice, reminding her that a LICH's life spans as long as that of celestial beings. Catherine confidently asserts that she stands by her decisions, swearing by her angelic powers that she has considered her actions with great care. Meanwhile, in White City, snow gently falls, a fitting tribute to the name of this enchanting place. After a long year of hard work, the townsfolk finally find a moment of peace and leisure. Among them is a certain paladin who seizes the chance to revel in the snow. Curiously, the cat asks the protagonist why he seems so excited. Gray replies, "It never snowed in the underworld. I've only read about it in books. Now that I can finally experience snow for myself, I'm living a dream." His cat insists that now he's a paladin and shouldn't be rolling around on the ground all day. The protagonist hesitates, recalling how the cat once claimed that rolling on the ground would make humans serve him at will. The cat quickly counters, stating that it's different for him as an animal, while Gray is a paladin. Even if a knight rolls around, the cat adds, people won't serve him. However, shortly after, a group of people arrives, bringing gifts and food for Gray, completely shattering the cat's theory. Ironically, this only strengthens the protagonist's belief that his thesis is correct. Meanwhile, the cat grows increasingly annoyed by Gray's foolishness. With a flick of his tail, he warns the protagonist not to use a cat as a model for behavior. As the cat darted around energetically, it sent snow flying in all directions. Gray quickly realized the feline was eager for a snowball fight. Just then, he collided with someone and instinctively apologized, only to be taken aback when he recognized Shelley standing before him. With a playful grin, he asked, "Do you want to join in on the fun and play in the snow?" Shelley hesitates, but then insists that she wants to discuss something personal. She invites him to take a walk with her. Noticing that she seems cold, Gray quickly offers her a blanket he had just received from a kind lady. After that, Shelley reveals that she heard Gray sold his castle to her grandfather, mentioning that Irene had granted him the Hamlet port thief some time ago. Gray, taken aback, asks if that's true. His cat chimes in, confirming it and questioning whether Gray has forgotten. A flashback unfolds, revealing the moment Gray sold the castle. The cat, visibly furious, confronts him, but Gray defends his decision, insisting he didn't need the place anymore, so he let it go. As he distributed gold to the townsfolk, the Duchess arrived to confront him. Irene wasted no time, demanding to know if it was true that Gray had sold the castle he had won. Sensing her anger, the protagonist hesitated for a moment, but ultimately decided to speak the truth. She pressed further, asking if Gray had sold the castle out of financial necessity. The protagonist shook his head. No, it wasn't for himself. His knights and many in the city were in dire need. He believed keeping the castle would be pointless, so he found this to be a viable solution. Irene acknowledges that she compensated the families of the deceased, yet overlooked the city's economic struggles. She praises Gray for bringing this to her attention. "I couldn't ask my subordinates to sell their skills to improve the economy," she admits, "but I truly appreciate what you've done." She assures him that she will address the issue and, as a reward, plans to assign Gray to a different team of thieves. Upon hearing this, the protagonist exclaims that Irene is a wonderful master and rushes to hug her. However, his size and strength nearly send her sprawling. The others quickly scold him for almost toppling his own master. Irene, brushing it off, reassures them that she's fine, just a little bump on her head from the armor. Seizing the moment, she turns to Gray and inquires about his future plans. After all, he may not realize it, but he is one of the 5 paladins in the world. With that declaration, he earned the right to participate in significant events across the kingdom. However, the protagonist firmly stated that he would not abandon his master. He may not know much, but one thing was certain. He was Irene's knight. Bound by his vow to her, he would always stand by her side. Hearing this, Irene felt a swell of admiration for him, mixed with regret for having suggested he leave. With her knight's words echoing in her mind, she reaffirmed her vow, no matter who or what Gray was before. The moment he pledged his loyalty to her, he became a knight. Irene promised to honor his position and protect him from any injustice. Returning to the present, Gray recounts the story, and Shelley nods in appreciation. Then, with a serious expression, she leans in and says she has a direct question for him, hoping he won't take offense. Soon, Shelley inquires whether he intends to join the Becker family. The protagonist, puzzled, asks if she is referring to another knightly title or something similar. His naivety is so pronounced that it even catches the attention of a young girl like Shelley. Meanwhile, his cat, as usual, watches with growing irritation. He warns that this conversation is veering into dangerous territory and attempts to interrupt. Gray, curious, asks why. The cat promises to explain later, but insists that for now, Gray should simply declare that he will not join the Becker family, yet will always serve as a knight. He then instructs Gray to repeat his words exactly from this moment on. After that, Shelley realizes that Gray has no relationship with Irene. To her, this means Gray is available to become part of her life. The protagonist confirms this, but the cat interjects, reminding him that he wasn't supposed to reveal that, as they had an agreement. Shelley notes that Gray responded straightforwardly, acknowledging that his comment was merely a joke. With that understanding, she decides not to bring up the topic again. As she heads home to meet the protagonist, her grandfather initially thought Gray was just an associate of the Holy Order, never suspecting that he was, in fact, a paladin. He then asked Shelley if she understood what that meant. Unsure at the time, she listened as her grandfather explained that Gray had no last name, signifying he didn't belong to any family. Gregory then suggested that Gray could become part of theirs, implying that Shelley knew what needed to be done. Fast forward to the present. Shelley reveals that she received orders to invite Gray on a blind date. However, only Gray seems to believe her, while his cat watches her with a suspicious glare. Shelley reassures Gray that he doesn't need to be so formal. After all, they're just going shopping and grabbing a bite to eat. The protagonist, though a bit confused, readily agrees to accompany her. Shelley then asks if he's truly free, not wanting to intrude if he has a task from Irene. Gray responds that his lady has assigned him to patrol the streets of White City and assist those in need. Shelley feels a wave of relief as she and Gray step out into the city. They embark on a leisurely stroll, exploring clothing stores and popular tourist spots along the way. Their adventure culminates at a charming candy shop where the sweet aroma of treats beckons them inside. Shelley selects a dessert called the Forest Volcano Sundae, exclaiming how delightful it looks. However, noticing that Gray hasn't touched his food, she asks if everything is all right. Gray responds that he simply doesn't know where to begin. Yet, beneath the surface, he thinks to himself that he needs to master magic if he wants to eat as quickly as possible. Amidst the unfolding scene, a figure approaches. The woman inquires if the girl before her is Shelley, granddaughter of Gregory. Shelley offers a polite smile, but a sense of foreboding stirs within her. She senses trouble on the horizon. This woman is none other than Elisa Clara Fernandez, the eldest daughter of Duke Fernandez. Shelley replies, feigning casualness, that it's a coincidence to see her there and asks when Elisa arrived in the city. She replies that it was when Irene ascended to the throne. Elisa chides Shelley, insisting that she shouldn't act like a child. Wandering the streets aimlessly is unbecoming for someone of her stature. Shelley retorts that she isn't alone. She has a knight by her side. In response, Elisa reminds her that at 16, she must conduct herself with maturity, being mindful of her words and actions to avoid bringing shame to their family. After that, she announces that she'll leave them to enjoy their meal and walks away. Shelley breathes a sigh of relief, admitting that the tension was eating her alive. Curious, the protagonist asks who that person was and why she made Shelley so uneasy. Shelley explains that Elisa is somewhat like a cousin to her. Due to their family's marriage ties, the Gregory and Fernandez clans share a close bond. It's safe to say that the girls grew up side by side, sharing countless childhood adventures and forming a strong bond. One day, Elisa excitedly led Shelley to a hidden base, but Shelley hesitated, fearing it might be dangerous. Undeterred, Elisa urged her to join the exploration, promising it would be an unforgettable experience. However, the bond between them eventually began to fray. Shelley approached Elisa, admiring her in a beautiful dress, but Elisa quickly replied that it wasn't her choice. Confused, she questioned why she had to wear a thicker, heavier dress, simply because she was growing older. Not only that, but her behavior also had to adhere to strict etiquette standards. Shelley, curious, asked why Elisa didn't act as she truly wished. Elisa sighed, expressing her frustration at being unable to be the person she once was. Adults had drilled into her that only through rigorous etiquette training could a lady truly reflect her family's education and dignity. All of this was part of a girl's inner transformation. From that moment on, Elisa embraced her role as a true aristocrat, always radiant, elegant, and captivating at the balls. She resembled a delicate ornament, a sight that Shelley found rather dull. It made her ponder whether she would follow the same path, becoming a mere symbol of prestige for her family, destined to marry a man she had never met, all for the sake of reputation. Shelley had never found that kind of archetype particularly interesting, but one fateful night, everything changed. After their outing, Gray offered to walk her to the door, but she declined, knowing he needed to return to the castle. With a bittersweet farewell, he said goodbye and left, leaving Shelley to ponder the unexpected turn of events. Shelley can't help but marvel at how extraordinary Gray is. There's always something intriguing about him. She longs to learn more, yet she hesitates, feeling that her personal troubles might be a burden to him. Meanwhile, at Irene's castle, a messenger arrives, breathless and urgent, with news from the Alliance capital. Irene, sensing the gravity of the situation, inquires about the nature of the problem. The messenger announces that the turmoil in the royal capital has finally come to an end, and Prince Benedict I has ascended to the throne. He has issued a royal decree inviting Duchess Becker, Count Gregory, and Paladin Gray to his coronation ceremony. Shortly after, Gray receives the invitation and inquires about the Alliance capital. The cat replies, "It's the capital of the Kingdom of Isaac. Something significant is about to unfold." Meanwhile, Gregory inquires about his invitation to the banquet. Shelley explains that as an important ally of Irene, his presence is likely crucial. She speculates that the new king must have a strategy in mind regarding his relationship with Irene. Speaking of her, Irene acknowledges the banquet but insists she must attend a meeting instead. She warns her men to remain vigilant and prepare for the journey ahead. As dusk settled over the forest, a cave offered a temporary refuge. The tranquility was soon interrupted by the sound of a branch snapping underfoot, signaling an approaching presence. Dora, Jenny's loyal squire, turned to her master with urgency, alerting her that someone was coming. The protagonist, stripped of his knight's armor, stepped forward, his demeanor calm as he reassured them. "There's no need to be nervous." Jimmy questions what he's doing there, but Dora steps in, fiercely declaring that she won't let anyone lay a finger on her master. The protagonist calmly reassures them, stating he means no harm and has only come to deliver something important. As Jimmy's gaze falls on the set of armor, he asks what Gray intends to do with it. The protagonist then prompts Jimmy to recall the time he single-handedly annihilated an entire human army in the forest. Jimmy agrees. Gray then reveals that his guardian angel informed him that Jimmy's actions violate the pact between the Holy Spirit and the vampire clan, granting the angel the authority to eliminate the young vampire. However, Gray offers a twist. He is chosen to grant forgiveness, using his privilege as a paladin, on the condition that Jimmy becomes his follower. In doing so, all of Jimmy's sins will be redeemed. Jimmy questions whether Gray is trying to show them mercy. Gray shakes his head, clarifying that it's not about mercy at all. He argues that if a lich can become a paladin, then vampires should have that chance too. Regardless, they are now part of his Silver Moon Order, so they should gather their belongings and travel with him to the capital. Jimmy, visibly outraged, retorts that this is disgraceful. It would be better if Gray simply killed them both right then and there. Soon after, the newly appointed Duchess of Becker embarks on a journey to the Lion's capital, accompanied by her steadfast paladin. As they traverse the landscape, a thick fog envelops them. One of Irene's men warns that traveling in such mist can be perilous, and suggests they take refuge in a nearby village. Irene consents, but Gray, her feline companion, senses something amiss. He inquires about the distraction that has been plaguing Gray for some time. Gray expresses a strange unease about the mist surrounding them. His cat, Tonitos, reassures him that it's merely because he's never encountered anything like it in the underworld. There's nothing to worry about. But as they ride near a cliff, the fog thickens, obscuring the peril ahead. Suddenly, Gray nearly tumbles off the edge, heart racing. He glances back at Tonitos, concern etched on his face. "Are you okay?" he asks, his voice laced with urgency. The horse responds affirmatively, prompting Gray to wonder why it hadn't spoken up sooner. Just then, he hears voices calling his name. It's Irene. Realizing this, he begins shouting to reveal his location. Before long, Irene finds him and approaches with a concerned expression. "Don't go anywhere," she urges. "It's not safe for me to search for you alone." Gray is puzzled, wondering when Irene changed her armor. But that's not the only oddity. Moments later, she draws her sword and lunges at him. Confusion washes over Gray as he struggles to comprehend the sudden shift. Irene, her expression cold, tells him he still hasn't grasped the situation. With a chilling finality, she declares that she no longer needs him and commands him to disappear. The protagonist questions why she is acting so strangely, but then the cat chimes in, insisting that she's trying to kill him. It urges Gray to fight back. The cat continues, explaining that the war for the duchy has ended, and Irene no longer needs him. Moreover, Gray has become one of only 5 paladins in the world. Wherever he goes, he will draw more attention than the Duchess, and that's likely something she doesn't want. He realizes that Irene likely harbors resentment toward Gray and has been biding her time to eliminate him. However, the protagonist dismisses the cat's claims, insisting that Irene isn't capable of such malice. The cat presses on, urging Gray to fight, warning that his life hangs in the balance. Yet, the protagonist stands firm, declaring that he made a vow to Irene and cannot bring himself to harm her. With a laugh, Irene challenges him, questioning whether he truly takes those vows to heart. She unsheathes her sword and calls him an imbecile, striking him without hesitation. Witnessing this, the cat remarks that they are now doomed. With the blow, Gray's helmet is knocked off, revealing his true face. Irene smirks, noting the irony. The paladin ordained by the Holy Spirit is, in fact, an undead. Now, she has even more reason to finish him off. Not just Irene, but the soldiers also launch their attack. Gray has officially become a declared enemy of the Duchess, and his armor lies in ruins. Now exposed, he takes a brutal blow to the arm, resulting in his limb being torn off, an outcome Gray never anticipated. Irene observes coldly, remarking that an undead is even more fragile than she had imagined. Furious, the cat urges Gray to fight back, insisting that he'll end up dead if he doesn't react. Yet nothing can sway the protagonist to confront Irene, grateful for his unwavering resolve. She remarks that if he values his vows so deeply, he should obey her until the very end. With that, she commands him to return to hell. Conflicted, Gray attempts to speak, questioning whether his master truly intends to kill him. Irene inquires if he fears death. Gray responds that if she truly wishes to go through with this, he won't put up any resistance. Meanwhile, his cat, sensing the tension, becomes increasingly anxious and desperately wants to intervene. Gray continues, "If you really intend to end my life, then you should embrace me fully. The faster the embers fade, the sooner I will vanish completely." Irene's irritation flares as she suspects Gray is merely bluffing. "I have the courage to kill you if necessary," she declares defiantly. Gray, however, remains unconvinced. "I don't believe you," he replies coolly. "After all, under the Treaty of the Gray Vestments, you can't act against me without permission. So if you won't make a move, then I will." Gray places his hand on his chest and declares that he doesn't care who or what stands before him. He will not allow this creature to insult his lady again. He warns it never to attempt to invade his consciousness again. With a fierce determination, he rips the life essence from his body. In that moment, the creature disguised as Irene realizes that its plan has crumbled. Moments later, the protagonist awakens to find himself beside the real Irene. Her eyes are wide with fear as she asks about Gray, having seen him frozen and unresponsive, even when called. He dismisses her concerns, insisting it was nothing. As he glances around, he notices the mist is already lifted, but Irene looks confused, questioning what he means. She remarks that Gray must have dozed off on his horse and dreamed, as there's not a trace of mist in sight. If he's feeling weary, she suggests they stop at a village just ahead to camp for the night. Gray, however, can't shake the feeling that something more is at play. Meanwhile, the true culprits behind the illusion lurk nearby. A demon named Zelda scoffs, incredulous that Tarvia was scorched by nothing more than the faint embers of a mere lich. Zelda remarks that the little lich is bolder than they anticipated. Tarvia expresses her confusion about how humans managed to recruit a lich to fight on their side. Zelda then suggests exposing the lich to the humans, but Tarvia quickly dismisses that idea as the worst possible approach. She explains that the Demon King is intent on troubling those ancient beings in heaven. Furthermore, she adds that capturing the Paladin and revealing his true identity at just the right moment would be the perfect strategy. Zelda warns that the guardian angel is on its way, prompting Tarvia to insist they must leave at once. Zelda dismisses the threat, claiming it's merely a Class 2 angel, one that could easily overpower her with a single hand. Tarvia retorts that if the angel wishes to shatter the pact between heaven and the abyss, then so be it. Realizing the gravity of the situation, Zelda concedes and agrees to leave without delay. Sometime later, back in the village, the protagonist spots his guardian angel approaching and inquires about her return. Catherine smiles and replies that she brings both good and bad news, asking him which he'd prefer to hear first. Gray, eager for a silver lining, chooses the good news. With a hint of pride, the angel reveals that the Holy Spirit has officially approved her as Gray's guardian angel. She also informs Gray that he is now officially recognized by the Holy Spirit as a paladin. Overjoyed, Gray celebrates this monumental achievement. However, the angel quickly adds a note of caution. He cannot reveal his identity. If he were to be exposed and captured by humans, the angels would immediately sever their ties with him. Catherine offers her apologies, explaining that this is as far as she can go to support him. The protagonist, a bit bewildered, asks if that's everything. Catherine, noticing Gray's naivety, reassures him that as long as he remains discreet, he can do as he pleases. Grateful, the protagonist thanks the angel for her guidance, prompting Catherine to smile and remark on his optimistic and innocent nature. Before departing, Catherine catches a whiff of something unusual and inquires about the strong demonic scent lingering on Gray. Meanwhile, in the lion's capital of the Kingdom of Isaac, Irene's cavalry draws near, capturing the admiration of the crowd. People gaze in awe at her and the paladin, reveling in the presence of such noble figures. Children excitedly declare their dreams of becoming paladins themselves, convinced that the people of Alan will be envious of their valor. The protagonist, taken aback, admits that while he anticipated this moment eventually, he never expected it to arrive so soon. Just before this, his guardian angel had warned him about an impending encounter with a demon. Gray turns to Catherine asking if she's referring to the mist he encountered earlier. He reassures her not to worry, claiming he managed to drive the creature away though. Truth be told, it wasn't even that strong. With that, Catherine reminds him of the non-interference pact between angels, demons, and liches, known to demons as the Gray Robocord. According to this agreement, demons are forbidden from using force against Gray. Instead, they will attempt to undermine his faith. The protagonist, aware that many paladins have fallen to their corruption before him, vows resolutely that he will not succumb, no matter the temptation that arises. Catherine expresses her belief in him and urges him to exercise caution, as his next opponent could be any human. She explains that Gray is already aware of the demons, so they will no longer approach him directly. Instead, they will disguise themselves as humans to deceive him. Puzzled, Gray asks how he can distinguish between the two. The angel replies that it won't be easy. Unlike paladins, demonic associates lack magical powers, making them indistinguishable from ordinary humans. She can only warn him to be cautious of any suspicious individuals who might approach. In the present, the new king of Isaac, Lord Sharp Benedict, announces that the paladin has finally arrived. Accompanying him are Duchess Irene Baker and her entourage, who respectfully salute the king. Sharp Benedict declares that he is not yet king, with his coronation set for just a few days away. The crown remains in the bishop's possession. Irene inquires if this is the reason His Majesty requested the paladin to witness the ceremony. Benedict confirms her suspicion, adding that Gray, as a paladin, shouldn't need to perform such a grand salute. However, Irene counters that Gray, in addition to being a paladin, is also a count of the Duchy of Becker. As such, he is still a subject and must bow. Upon hearing this, Sharp Benedict remarks that a mere county is hardly sufficient for a paladin. In that moment, Irene understands she is being tested. While she anticipated a ceremonial meeting, she hadn't expected him to be so forthright from the outset. Nevertheless, she chooses to engage and responds that the new king's statement is indeed reasonable. Sharp Benedict quickly recognizes her keen ability to read the room. After that, he instructs everyone to rise and announces that a welcome banquet for the kingdom's heroes awaits them. As they enter, Gray marvels at the palace's beauty. His cat chimes in, noting that this is indeed the king's palace. Gray reflects on the king's earlier question about his status as a count, finding it rather odd. The cat reassures him, saying that the king has no issue with Gray being a count. He believes that Irene isn't fit to be his master. Gray, however, disagrees and asks the cat if he thinks Irene is a poor master. The cat shrugs, admitting he wouldn't know after all. He's just a cat. Yet, he adds that Gray's feelings for Irene are so evident that even a blind person couldn't miss them. Gray then retorts that it's painfully clear the king is a demonic associate, which is precisely why he's targeting Lady Irene. He's determined to take action immediately, but then his guardian angel calls, urging him to reconsider. Gray questions whether the king isn't linked to demons. Catherine responds, emphasizing a crucial point. While an associate is undoubtedly a villain, not every villain is an associate. Catherine can't help but feel she's explaining this to a child. Gray has lived among humans for quite some time, she says, her tone firm. Have you never tried to grasp the structure of human society? You are now a paladin, and your actions reflect the sacred order and the Holy Spirit. She pauses, letting her words sink in. Meanwhile, Benedict I is the king, the ruler of this land, embodying the very essence of the kingdom of Isaac. If Gray were to make a move against him, it would raise questions about whether it was a direct order from the Holy Spirit himself. If challenged innocently, such an action could be interpreted as the Holy Spirit declaring war on the nation. The protagonist realizes the weight of this situation. Catherine adds that even if the king is truly allied with demons, Gray cannot take direct action against him. Gray inquires about the reason behind it. She explains that just as he dons his helmet, the demon's envoy wears the mask of a king. When he puts on the mask, he embodies that king. Only when the mask is removed, revealing his true face, can Gray deliver holy justice. Understanding her words, Gray vows to tear the mask from his face. However, Catherine notes that he truly comprehends this much later, during the unfolding of the ball. Irene strides toward the protagonist, drawing the attention of those nearby. Whispers ripple through the crowd, noting that she is the first woman to ascend to the rank of Grand Duchess in the kingdom. Some speculate that Gray's unwavering loyalty to her must stem from a romantic bond. After all, what other reason could there be for a paladin to willingly pledge himself to a lesser duchy? Irene remarks that the comments are intentionally made, just as the new king welcomes the delegation from the Becker Duchy. He then invites the Duchess of Becker to dance, asking if she will grant him that honor. Irene acknowledges Sharp's kindness before leaving the protagonist to join the new king on the dance floor. Meanwhile, Gray is left wondering why he has been sidelined once again. His cat advises him that it's perfectly normal not to always trust his lady, and insists that Gray must learn to defend himself. The cat then mentions that he's been to a ball before, so all Gray needs is a partner to dance with. Just as he spots Shelley in the crowd, another girl steps forward to claim the role of his partner, but she's not the only one vying for his attention. Several young ladies arrive, each vying for Gray's attention, even resorting to playful shoving and near slaps in their eagerness to claim him as their partner. Startled, Gray looks around and asks, "What's wrong with you all?" The cat, observing the chaos, smirks and remarks, "Looks like you're quite popular with the ladies." Before he knows it, he's surrounded by eager dancers, all insisting they want to twirl him around the floor. The protagonist is left utterly bewildered. Finally, he raises his voice, declaring that he will only dance with Lady Shelley. Shelley, overhearing his proclamation, visibly bristles at his words. Curiosity swirls among the guests as they speculate whether Gray is referring to Gregory's granddaughter, who arrived with the Becker delegation. Whispers ripple through the crowd, questioning why a mere count's granddaughter has captured the attention of the illustrious Silver Moon Knight. Amidst the murmurs, Gray boldly invites her to dance, drawing the eyes of everyone in the room. Yet Shelley feels a wave of awkwardness wash over her as the other girls turn their gaze, their attention now fixed squarely on her. Gray notices her discomfort and casually mentions that he only wanted to dance. However, his words do little to ease Shelley's embarrassment over the invitation. In a sudden burst of courage, she rushes over to Gray and pulls him onto the dance floor. Before long, the protagonist finds himself drifting away from the other girls, lost in the rhythm as he dances solely with Shelley. As always, she has his full attention, but instead of being guided, she finds herself leading him. Gray praises her remarkable ability to guide, yet the disappointment is evident on Shelley's face. The king observes the dance, puzzled by the reversal of traditional roles. Irene attempts to explain, saying that Gray has always enjoyed exploring new experiences. Curious, Sharp inquires if Gray wears armor constantly and if no one has ever seen his face. Irene admits that, at least for her, that's true. However, Sharp brushes it off, insisting that it doesn't matter how Gray looks, girls will always be drawn to him. He turns to Irene, asking if she agrees. Confused, she replies that she doesn't quite grasp what His Majesty means. Sharp Benedict then expresses his desire to speak with her privately. In solitude, he expresses his desire to strike a deal with Irene in exchange for Gray, insisting that the Silver Moon Knight is precisely the kind of subordinate he requires. However, he is acutely aware that Gray's loyalty lies with Irene. Thus, he proposes that she break her vows and compel Gray to swear allegiance solely to the new king. Irene responds firmly, reminding him that this is not a decision she can make on her own. Sharp urges her not to dismiss his proposal too quickly, as he has more to share. He offers a prosperous territory in exchange, assuring Irene that she could maintain her grip on all the land she currently controls. This deal wouldn't just double her existing territory, it would also eclipse her father's accomplishments. Despite the tempting offer, Irene replies that she cannot make such a decision on her own. Sharp Benedict attempts to clarify his point, urging Irene not to be so stubborn. He insists that she won't want to hold on to that knight forever. Confused by his words, Irene replies, "I'm not sure I understand what you mean." Sharp tells Irene not to feign confusion over the difference between black and white. He paints a vivid picture, a knight on horseback, accompanied by an angel clad in holy light, bravely confronting an army of 100,000 men, all for the sake of rescuing the one girl he loves. It's a tale steeped in romance, and he can't help but ask if her heart hasn't been stirred by such a story. Everyone assumes that Irene and Gray are a couple, but Irene insists she cannot part with her knight. She wants to keep him for herself. Sharp interjects, declaring that Irene is his lady. As the sole representative of House Becker, she cannot marry Gray. Furthermore, as a paladin recognized by the Holy Council, Gray cannot marry Irene either. If they were to pursue a relationship, it would jeopardize their reputations and could spell disaster for the newly stabilized Duchy of Becker. Sharp insists that they can continue their relationship as master and servant, believing that Irene still has a chance. Following the Battle of White City, royal prestige has plummeted to an all-time low. The Kingdom of Alan is beginning to mobilize, yet many royal troops refuse to follow the new king's commands. Irene declares that if the Kingdom of Alan launches an invasion, she will stand by the new king. However, he counters that a mere verbal promise holds little weight in these turbulent times. He recalls how his own father was notorious for making empty promises, leaving him yearning for a paladin who embodies unwavering loyalty, especially one not born in this land. Sharp paints a vivid picture. In a hypothetical scenario, a paladin rises as a hero, triumphing in a battle against a foreign nation. Upon returning home, the hero would kneel before the girl who once seemed unattainable, proposing to her with heartfelt sincerity. In that case, everyone would applaud and shower them with blessings. He would gain fame and status, the girl would have the knight she loves by her side, and the new king would enjoy a strong reign resulting in a victory for all. Meanwhile, back at the ball, the dance comes to an end, and Shelley takes a moment to pause and catch her breath. As she surveys the hall, Shelley notices that all eyes are still on her. It dawns on her that without the king's approval, these reserved, noble ladies would never dare to act so brazenly. She realizes that they couldn't have come to the ball for her sake. A sinking feeling settles in. She understands that she is drawing attention away from Irene, the true star of the evening. Gray notices that Shelley seems tired and asks if she's all right. She assures him that she is, but then questions why he chose her to dance among everyone else. He replies that she was the one who taught him how to dance, and he's worried about making a fool of himself with others. Shelley encourages him not to be afraid and gestures for Gray to come closer, wanting to share something with him. Returning to the new king, he remarks that Gregory is a cunning strategist who managed to unite 7 families without a single drop of blood spilled. He points out that Irene should understand all too well that Gregory's assistance stemmed from his recognition of the bond between her knight and the church. As long as Gregory remains alive, Irene will struggle to wield the true power of the duchy. Sharp interjects, noting how easily control can slip away, and offers his help in managing the situation. Meanwhile, Shelley warns Gray not to accept any dance invitations except from Irene. She explains that this is a test from the king, aimed at separating him from his master. Confused, Gray asks why the king would want to do that. Shelley replies that after the recent battle, the royal family's prestige has waned, while the influence of the clergy has risen. To secure his reign, the king will undoubtedly seek to align himself with the Pope. As a paladin who distinguished himself in the Battle of White City, Gray has become the shining emblem of the Holy Order. The religious reform he spearheaded, in collaboration with the Principality of Becker, has brought the Holy Council a taste of success. Now their sights are set on the entire kingdom of Isaac. The king declares that to implement these reforms across the realm, the presence of paladins is essential, and so the Holy Council prepares to answer that call. Shelley suggests that if the Holy Council aims to strengthen its religious influence in the country, they will likely urge Gray to distance himself from Irene and pledge his loyalty to the king. Gray, however, expresses his disdain for the king, suspecting him to be an ally of the demons. Just then, his cat interjects, advising him to keep such thoughts to himself and to avoid dragging ordinary people into perilous affairs. With that, Shelley explains that it's not a matter of liking or disliking. The Pope appointed Gray as a paladin, and he must adhere to the guidelines of the Holy Spirit. She then inquires about Gray's next steps. The king turns to Irene, urging her to think carefully, reminding her that he knows she is a wise girl. Meanwhile, the protagonist turns to his guardian angel, questioning whether it is truly the will of the Holy Spirit for him to leave Irene behind. Catherine explains that the Holy Spirit rarely issues specific commands, preferring instead that believers think for themselves. Gray realizes that this isn't quite what the Holy Spirit desires. However, the angel reassures him that the Pope is undoubtedly acting in the Holy Spirit's interest. Gray reflects that the Holy Spirit also doesn't want him to break his vows, but he comes to a crucial decision. There are more pressing matters at hand, especially with demons lurking among them. Catherine believes this to be true. If anything surpasses vows and loyalty, it is confronting the demons lurking among them. Sometime after the ball, in the bright light of day, a demon approaches Zelda and Tarvia, remarking on the rarity of their request for her assistance. Zelda inquires if she's surprised, prompting Tarvia to question what makes her more suitable for this mission than the rest of them. Meanwhile, the demon observes the angel from a distance, pondering whether even a second-class angel has the power to thwart their plans. Tarvia warns her to be cautious and avoid engaging with the angel. However, the demon confidently replies that a second-class angel cannot hinder her from fulfilling her mission. Meanwhile, Catherine senses something unusual and inquires about the aura she just felt. Inside the royal castle, Gregory approaches Irene's room and knocks on the door, urging her to open up because he has something urgent to discuss. She quickly appears and invites him in. As he steps inside, Gregory notices that she's still wearing yesterday's dress, and it dawns on him that the Duchess hasn't even slept. Concerned, he asks, "Why haven't you changed?" Irene waves off his worry with a reassuring smile. "I'm fine," she insists, though her tired eyes tell a different story. "But now, I'd like to know what's so urgent." Gregory reveals that there was unusual troop movement in the Kingdom of Alan 4 days ago. The king had commanded Duke Downers to dispatch troops to the border, but Downers flatly refused. In truth, Gregory confides, this information is actually from 15 days prior. It was suppressed until recently. The royal family's prestige has plummeted to historic lows, and now the king is frantically searching for allies. He has been closely aligning himself with the church lately, likely in an attempt to gain the favor of the Holy Council. However, the council typically refrains from meddling in a nation's internal matters. This leaves Gregory concerned that the king may turn his sights on Gray or even Irene herself. Irene nods, acknowledging that Gregory's assessment is sound. After all, the king confronted her just last night. While Gregory stands by the king's side, he knows that the king remains oblivious to the true nature of his actions. Armed with this new information, Gregory realizes that the king has already set his plan in motion. He quickly inquires about Gray's whereabouts. The Duchess informs him that the Archbishop invited Gray to a service at the church that morning. Gregory's expression darkens. The church has been in collusion with the king for quite some time, he warns. Are you really comfortable letting Gray go there alone? The Duchess reassures him. There's no need to worry. Gray didn't go alone. At Pierce Cathedral, Gray arrives with Shelley by his side. He gazes in awe at the grandeur of the place, remarking that it far surpasses the church in White City. With a hint of excitement, he notes the remarkable coincidence of Shelley being invited as well. However, Shelley knows all too well that this was no coincidence at all. The night before, as she slept peacefully, Shelley was stirred awake by Irene's gentle presence. The Duchess confessed that she couldn't find rest and had a favor to ask. Upon hearing the request, Shelley couldn't help but feel that she was once again being drawn into taking the blame for Irene. Despite her reservations, she agreed, all the while plotting to hold this over Irene's head when the moment was right. Suddenly, someone calls out for Lord Paladin and rushes toward him. It's Dean, the priest from White City. Do you remember me, Gray? He asks. The protagonist nods, a smile breaking across his face. Of course. I wouldn't forget the one who enlightened me and revealed the truth of my heart. Shelley, puzzled, interjects, what are you talking about? But Dean swiftly redirects the conversation, dismissing it as merely a chat they had long ago. He informs the protagonist that the Archbishop is waiting for the Paladin at the cathedral. With determination, the protagonist ascends the stairs and greets the Archbishop at the top with utmost respect. However, the Archbishop soon notices the companion by the Paladin's side and realizes, with a hint of disappointment, that it is not the Grand Duchess of Becker who was the one officially invited. Shelley steps forward, introducing herself with a warm smile. Irene wasn't feeling well last night, so she sent me as her spokesperson. A murmur ripples through the gathered church members, and one of them questions the Archbishop. Did Irene intentionally choose not to attend? The Archbishop raises a hand, soothing the tension in the air. Let us not jump to conclusions. As a spokesperson, Shelley is fully capable of representing the Duchess of Becker. Upon discovering that Shelley had accompanied Gray, Gregory's irritation flared. He demanded to know why Irene had thrust his granddaughter into the spotlight. Irene calmly explained that the king intended to leverage emotional manipulation to sway Shelley into persuading Gray, a tactic supported by the church as well. She emphasized that she needed to make it clear she would not interfere. Ultimately, Gray's choices were his alone to make. Shelley is undoubtedly a smart girl, but Gregory believes this situation is beyond intellect. He argues that Irene is throwing his granddaughter into the fire, reminding her that Shelley is only 16 years old. Yet, Irene insists she thought this was what Gregory wanted, a relationship between Shelley and Gray, a way to bring him into the family. If he desires those benefits, he must also embrace the accompanying risks, Gregory interjects, asserting that it wouldn't matter either way. It's clear to everyone that Gray is far closer to Irene than to Shelley. Irene counters, stating that if she were to transfer Gray to the king out of her own personal feelings, it would be a betrayal of both Gray and his oath. She questions what right a selfish traitor would have to stand beside a paladin knight. As Gray gazes at the cathedral, he can't help but admire its stunning beauty, imagining that the interior must be even more magnificent. The runes on the walls are exquisite, he remarks, feeling the magic that seems to emanate from them. The Archbishop smiles and offers, if you're interested, I can arrange for someone to give you a tour of the entire cathedral later. After all, the capital's cathedral serves not only as a place for prayers and worship, but also oversees the entire diocese, with many clerics stationed here. Shelley remarks that the standards here are undoubtedly superior to those elsewhere, and the Archbishop nods in agreement. She then draws attention to a striking fresco that adorns the walls. The Archbishop inquires if she recognizes the painting. Shelley responds, noting that it depicts Abbot Sald, a holy man who was executed by a mob thousands of years ago. However, she admits she never expected to see such a piece in a church. The story sends a chill down the protagonist's spine. Meanwhile, the Archbishop insists that Abbot Sald was a truly devout saint. He championed a radical religious reform that angered both the nobility and the commoners of his time. As tensions escalated, the Holy Council found themselves with no choice but to withdraw their protection. For a time, his name became a taboo, whispered only in fear. It wasn't until 100 years later, when the controversy had faded into obscurity, that the Holy Council could finally restore his reputation. The Pope then included his deeds in the Church's history, serving as a cautionary tale for future generations. This painting was commissioned by the Pope himself, lending it an air of authenticity. Shelley finds it ironic that the Holy Spirit seemingly abandoned a devout man. In response, the Archbishop suggests that the Holy Spirit favors the people of the world over the devout. Shelley questions this, asking if the Holy Spirit truly prefers worldly individuals over saints who strive to give their all. The Archbishop suddenly realizes that the girl is deliberately speaking sarcastically, and a sinking feeling tells him that today's conversation is headed for trouble.